Alrighty. Welcome everyone. Looking to call the meeting to order. Regularly scheduled Slate Valley School District meeting at the high school here at 6:34. Before we go into approval of agenda, I just want to acknowledge a few things. Again, thank you for everyone for coming tonight. And if people can't hear me, just let me know. We're here tonight in person for the first time in 4 months, and I'm very happy and excited about that. There were a few board members who expressed reservations about meeting again in person, and I just want them to know that I share a lot of those same concerns. Getting together tonight was not a statement by any means. It was really just a show of support that, in 5 weeks' time, we're going to be opening up our schools to approximately 1,500 students and staff. And I just think meeting in person as a board is a step in the right direction. This has been a school year and a summer thus far full of uncertainties. And I just want to acknowledge Brooke and all the administrators for their hard work and all the sacrifices they've made personally as they plan for this upcoming school year, trying to interpret the guidance and sorting through the good information from the bad. I really do appreciate all the hard work that you guys do. I also want to acknowledge the custodians. They've been working by and large throughout the entirety of this pandemic, and they've been doing a great job cleaning our facilities and getting them ready for the beginning of the school year and moving all sorts of things around to make space possible. So I want to thank the custodians for their hard work. I also just want to address teachers and staff and all the other employees who will be coming back to work here within the next month. I realize there's lots of uncertainties and anxieties about returning to work, and I just want to let you know that none of those concerns are going to be dismissed. We take all concerns and seriously, but at the same time, not every request is going to be met either. There will be expectations for attendance and for performance, and those will have to be met. Education is essential. Our teachers are essential, and we need you in school. Okay, it's not on the agenda, but
Yeah, it
is it?
First thing, very tall.
Oh, it is in bold. Let's rise for those here in person and pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just to finish my thoughts before we get into the meeting, none of us are experts. Everyone here is just doing the best that we can. I know that we all care so much about the education for our kids, and for the safety of our kids. And I know that we will find the proper balance to do both. We can't predict the negative outcomes or the positive outcomes. There's no guarantee of success or of safety. That was true before the pandemic, and it's true now. We're all just going to do the best that we can. And I'm quite confident that we're going to meet the challenges, and we're going to have a great year here at Slate Valley. And when we look back, once this year is passed, we're all going to have learned more about each other. We're going to have made some new friends, and we're going to have grown together to become a stronger community. So I'm very optimistic that this year is going to be a success, and we are going to be a shining example throughout Vermont on how we can reopen our schools and do it safely. So the hard work has started, but we're gonna start it tonight as well. So this meeting, there's two big issues, obviously. One is the fact that we don't have a budget, and the second is the reopening of schools. So I'd kind of like to split those two topics in half. Regarding public comment, I'd like to offer public comment in the beginning here for people who have comments about budgetary concerns and the revote and any other topics. And then later in the discussion, when we get into the reopening, I also will offer the public a chance to voice their concerns about reopening, if there are any parents or community members attending online. So we had some public meetings a couple weeks ago, or 10 days ago. I'd like to go around to each of the towns and a representative from each town and give us feedback on what you heard, focusing on new things that you heard, not necessarily the things that we've heard over and over, but any new concerns raised by the public, and what we can do in these final 2 weeks to educate, communicate, and get the vote out. So, I guess with that said, you kind of have an understanding of where I'm going with the agenda. There's a few other items. We'll kind of push those to the end. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda with any other thoughts or concerns people might have.
So moved.
Second.
Any other items to consider for the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Who made the motion, please? I'm not seeing your faces to know who's saying that.
Peter Stone.
And Julie.
Peter and Julie, did you hear that, Bonnie?
Yes, thank you. If you could identify who's making the motions, because there's so many faces on the screen, you can't see who's speaking.
Next, looking for a motion to approve the minutes from June 22.
So moved. Glenn.
Second, Tony.
Are there any discussion or changes to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I will read correspondence before I backtrack to public comment. This correspondence is from Bonnie Condit, a third grade teacher at Castleton Elementary. She writes, "Dear members of the school board, thank you very much for the slate clock you sent in honor of my retirement. I am really going to miss working with all the staff, students, and families in our district. I have truly enjoyed my 33 years at Castleton Elementary. Sincerely, Bonnie Condit." So thank you for that note, Bonnie. You taught both my kids, and we will certainly miss you. All right, so we'll break out into the feedback from the community meetings, and we'll start that first by offering public comment. Are there any community members here in person or online who have a public comment relative to budgetary concerns or any other items outside of reopening? Okay, I guess I'll rely on you.
Somebody has their hand up. Roy has his hand up.
Yes, Roy. Maybe just forward in the grass a little bit. That's good.
it back at the police presence in the budget back to this high school. Two, I've got four of them actually. Regulations, how much somebody to meet all the state. And number three, I have a problem with voting for this budget if schools are not open. I don't think we need this type of budget. Schools are going to stay closed. Eliminate a lot of these items. If we're going to go through another year of the schools being closed.
All right, so I guess one at a time. Cheryl, do you want to just address the,
I did not hear any of the questions.
I can repeat for you. His first question was regards to, have we made any cuts to the security presence to our buildings? I think it was specific to the high school.
No.
Okay? No. What was the second one?
I didn't understand, was that about graduation?
No, it's required.
Unfunded mandate.
Oh,
the unfunded mandate?
What, is there anything in the budget?
No, I don't have a dollar amount for unfunded mandate. I mean, it's all throughout the budget. I mean, it's all the, let's see, we identified things and then go back. Special education. We have special education. I think Chris is the one that has it. Universal preschool, yeah.
Find them throughout the budget in a variety asking for law.
It's in the frequently asked questions document on the website.
What's it in the, yeah? I
Yes,
think
it's on
actually
the
it is in
frequently
there.
asked questions document that's on the budget page on the website, on the unfunded mandate.
Right.
Yep.
The FAQ on the website has that.
I have an extra copy. Would you like a copy of the unfunded mandate?
No, I'm
from the
fine.
FA? Oh,
Yeah, we had under
no, I
Act,
meant for the gentleman. This is from
we had Act
the website.
177, the proficiency-based learning, the personal, learning, flexible pathways. Multi-tiered systems of support for social emotional learning, ELA, math. We have intervention programs, positions. We identified universal preschool that we already mentioned.
To address your last concern about voting for a budget if we don't return in person, yeah, I think that's a valid concern to have. Unfortunately, we're trying to deal with reopening schools, but also trying to pass a budget. And I do have concerns that some people who have voted no before might see us not reopening and have further doubts about supporting our budget. So I acknowledge that concern. I think it exists.
But we have no intention of not reopening.
No, correct.
I think it's important important to recognize too that even during the period of school closures, folks were working, students were doing classes, activities were still happening. So learning did not stop, but it needed to be.
And we weren't closed by choice. We were closed because everybody wanted
Is there any other public comment from those here or attending online, Brooke? Do you see any comments?
Is there any comments online that anyone would like to share?
Okay.
Don't believe so.
All right, thank you, Roy. So now I'll just go to rotate through the towns, and if anyone would like to share their feedback that they received from their community, that'd be great. Why don't we start in Fairhaven? Tanya, Rick, and Mike? Tanya.
4 times a day.
You work with a Tanya.
This one more. Okay.
And what?
All right.
That's a good
Because
idea.
otherwise I'm typing in
okay.
what from doing saying.
That's a good idea. That's a great idea.
I gather folks online are having a hard time hearing, so I'll come to this mic.
And there are 61 people online, so I
Excellent.
want to make sure they can hear.
Excellent. So, yeah, Rick Wilson and myself, we attended the information section here. We had a very different group. It was a larger group than the first go around. It was made up of a teacher in our community as well as her family, some retirees in the area, and some folks who had kids in the system previously, but I don't believe they have children in here now. Felt it was a very constructive, positive conversation. A lot of the questions that came out were similar to what we had heard the first time through. So I'll try to touch on some of those that are a little different. The conversation teetered back and forth between bond and budget. There's still some confusion or some questions about how they overlap or how they're separated, if you will. So we have to jump back and forth. There were some questions with regards to maintenance. How is the budget, or how has maintenance been handled in the budget previously, and how is the money spent? There were questions as to the current situation with a lot of our online and virtual learning. How has that worked out, and how are our students handling it? As well as how are our teachers and administrators handling it? Great conversation or great comment from our teacher who was in the audience who mentioned that they were working very hard and putting a lot of extra hours in, and a lot of hours that were non-traditional, if you will, working when students were available and also working when parents were available to help students, which required a lot of hours from, let's say 6 to 9 in the evening, as opposed to your traditional 7 to 3 or so. Questions with regards to what are some of the savings that have come up through the consolidation of a couple of years ago, but also were we able to realize any savings through the closing of schools in favor of an online model? What else? Questions with regards to how are we operating now in the way of, without a budget as of July 1st, how are we operating? And we're borrowing money with which to do so. The question, what happens if we do not pass the budget? Does the state take over, or do we continue to go on until we get a budget? Receive the question which comes up very often is, will my taxes go up based on this budget? Complicated answer, of course. How does our spending per student compare to that of others? If sports are canceled this fall, what happens to budgetary, what happens to money that is budgeted for sports? And that's some ideas with regards to a flyer or getting information out, as far as adding the bit about absentee ballots. I see it's on there, which is great. And then just a consolidated, bullet-pointed list of differences between the previous budget or even 2 budgets ago, so what we're trying to pass or propose now. Just a real simplified version of where the increases or decreases might have been. So. Rick, am I missing anything?
Well, another question they had is the deferred maintenance aspect of things, whether or not we're addressing them at all. And we explained to them that we had a surplus that was put in there to renovate the superintendent's office. And that money was left in there, and we're using some of that money for some maintenance things that have come up. But there was some concern that we weren't, it hadn't been addressed for years. But why was it not addressed for years? Why all of a sudden all this bond thing came up? When some of this stuff should have been, eased out over the years. Taken care of.
All right, thanks, Mike and Rick. West Haven, that would be Tanya and Angie.
Tanya and Angie, can one of you speak to the West Haven meeting?
Sure, this is Angie. It was very similar to our last meeting. We had about 6 people in attendance besides Tanya and myself. And their concerns were very similar to their concerns at the previous meeting. Basically that 75% of our budget is salaries and benefits, and that that we really need to look at how we can reduce that cost, and that perhaps staff and teachers and administration need to really think hard about taking a reduction in pay because everyone else in the community is either, a lot of people are not working and everything else is costing more these days due to the virus, and that they're hoping to really get us down to a 0% increase for equalized people. So that was really the feedback we got from West Haven. I don't know, Tanya, if you want to add to that or not? No, I think that covered it. Thank you.
Angie, if I could just ask a follow-up, did you get any feedback on how we can best communicate and educate people here in these last 2 weeks to get the vote out? Talking to that box. That's not her.
You must be shouldn't hear you.
Angie, did you hear Tim?
All right, let's move on.
Talking while muted. She's
I
talking.
think you're muted.
Okay. I think I tried to mute myself during that. Did you hear anything I said?
No.
No, we heard the initial feedback, but did you get my follow-up question?
About communication?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there has to be that better line that we talked about better communication of what we send, but not too much, and more readability than, but also not kind of a deluge of information that's just not readable as well. So finding that balance is what I heard.
Okay, thank you. Becky Spears, you're from Benson. Did you attend the meeting? And then Patty online, so.
Rebecca's online.
And Rebecca, yes. Sure.
Rebecca or Patty, do you want to share the information from Benson?
Sure, I can if you want me to. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Definitely.
We had about 6 people, I think, attend, besides Amy and the 3 board members. These are in no specific order, I just have some general information, but the new things that were brought up were newer. One was we did talk about teacher pay, teacher benefits, and individuals there were surprised to hear that teachers pay anything toward their medical insurance. Thought that might be a good thing to make sure that we share with them in the future. I had brought copies of the FAQs that
I think you had done, Brooke, maybe, or Cheryl.
Yep.
And I gave them those copies. They thought that that was a really great communication tool, and we should send that out more widely than we are doing right now, possibly putting something like that in local papers. They did talk about, from a communication standpoint, that the papers they like best are like the Benson, whatever the monthly Benson newsletter is that comes out. Yeah, what's it called?
Benson
I
Bulletin.
read it every month, but from that to the Rutland Herald, to the Addison Independent, to the Lakeside News, whatever, you know, they want us to continue to put all that information in those news sources, those newspapers. We talked a bit about unfunded mandates and, you know, the deferred maintenance, same thing that I think maybe it was Rick. I'm sorry, I can't really hear anything anybody's saying, so, but I think Rick might have been talking about that. They were really confused as to how consolidation has saved us money and would like to specifically know where those areas of savings are. They were curious about middle school and the bond, but then we talked a bit about just teachers in general and how licensing limitations, you know, cause us to have to look at different cohorts of kids in different ways because of middle school licenses. And they too were wondering if we could have a 0% increase in our per pupil spending. I think that's all I got out of it, but Becky or Becca, do you want to talk to that?
They also mentioned that they would love to see maybe the chair and the co-chair out in front of Shaw's, passing out flyers and really talking about the vote, and helping people understand that's one store that everybody from the community goes to. And they thought that might be a really great way to get information out. We also had a wonderful letter from Norma Phillips, who attended our first meeting, just saying how impressed she was with all of us, and she thought maybe one of the ways to get more information out into the public is by having a select member from each of the towns attend the school board meetings.
The other thing I can add to that was that when we were sitting there talking through it, several of them commented that our budget where we're sitting now, the revised version, is an improvement, and they weren't that upset about us getting to that point given the fact that the insurance costs have gone up as much as they had. So for the little bit that we have control over, it didn't bounce that high.
All right, thank you, Benson. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The other thing that we had was full support of our community for our school, and just rallying around our schools, and the people that came were in full support of our schools.
That's always great to hear. Thanks, Becca. All right, Orwell, Glenn, Peter, John. Oh, am I cutting somebody off again? Sure, go ahead.
I'll do it, then you can.
They liked the opportunity to speak like in the small group setting, but I think they also wished a member of administration was there to speak to, as well as maybe the board chair could have been at the individual meeting as well.
All right, thank you.
Tim, can I say one other thing? I'm sorry, it's Patty speaking.
Sure, go ahead, Patty.
They were curious as to why, if we are a consolidated board, we would be having individual town board meetings. They thought it should be a consolidated board meeting.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not a consolidated board meeting, a consolidated informational meeting, excuse me.
Thank you. Peter from Orwell, what do you got?
We had probably 15, 20 people there, some retirees, a few parents, a teacher, not from our district, but from a different district. And most of the concerns were of information, not knowing what's going on that nature. Somebody did say we need to think outside the box, that we're not doing it enough. like, well, they just threw out there, get rid of, transportation. I don't know what they meant by that exactly, but that was one of their biggest things. And they were wondering about the, cost of the schools, and if we're gonna be doing virtual, one guy was wondering if we should just be closing all the schools and saving that money. I'm not sure what they mean by closing the schools, because, buildings have to be heated or whatever. And then the cost, they want to know the cost we saved last year in each building because there's no kids in it. So that's pretty much what I got out of it. John probably had some.
Yeah, okay. Oh. Okay, this is John. So at the beginning of the discussion, one of the attendees clearly stated that, it wasn't so much the numbers of the budget why it didn't pass. That there is just tiring of, after going through the last couple of years in Act 46, the budgets we put out there, they don't get the information they used to. We talked a little bit about, it used to be they would see a full budget in their town reports. So we moved on from there, but one of the other things that they really were concerned about, since even though we're a consolidated school district, they don't feel the same way. I guess they feel like they don't get the same information they used to. A very specific point was every year in the town report, the principal did a letter, basically a state of the school, and they're not getting it. They're wondering what's happening with that. Other things that they had talked about, Peter said about thinking outside the box in transportation. It wasn't so much not doing transportation, but the comment was made that in the mornings and the afternoons they go by the school, and we've got the buses there, but so many people are already dropping off their kids. Do we need the buses? I know prior to COVID, we were about to embark, if we hadn't already, on an audit of bus ridership. So that's something we may want to come back to in the fall, depending on how we decide to do transportation. Something else that was stated very clearly, it was almost unanimous, I would say, that the people think that when we have half days, it is a waste of time. First of all, we've got to get the kids there. They only have part of a day of school, then they eat lunch, then we have to transport them home. First of all, they feel the kids are not getting much learning accomplished in that time. Plus, you have the issue of then they have to provide child care or find child care for that day. Another question as far as funding goes, either COVID related or non-COVID related, what type of grants are we applying for to fund different projects? So I know at the end of the school year, there was some training for teachers on remote learning. Learning how to do remote education. And the other main question, two things here. First of all, do we go back to remote learning? And one other thing back to the teachers, as a board, have we set a policy around remote learning? Attendance of kids, because there are a lot of people that just didn't show up or showed up for the last 5 minutes of the class. must the student have the camera on to be counted as present? And also the prohibition of video games or other distractions at home while there's events. So I also got an email from someone the next day who wanted to attend but just couldn't. They were very supportive, of many of our programs. One suggestion that this person made was that in Orwell, I guess we're doing the pre-K through Mary Hope. And we'd really like to see that come out of Mary Hogan, and that would be our own program. At a final note, someone else had commented, with the amount of things that are going out, in social media, are we giving our teachers any instruction on, what is appropriate, to put out? So that was about it.
Thank you, John. Glenn, anything to add?
They hit the high points.
All right, Mr. Hart.
Can't hear nothing back here.
Well, we'll do our best to speak up.
I got a pretty loud voice.
Must be that teacher voice.
Hard acts to follow. Happy to hear that my constituents in Hubbardton are kind of on the same wavelength as everybody else. I had a very lively bunch, 8, which was larger than the past. They were very appreciative of the community-based approach, and despite our issues passing both the bond and the budget, there was a general feeling of being pro-education and pro-community. Contrary to the first meeting, this was very, very COVID-centric. Lots of unknowns, and I didn't have a lot of answers, but I think it felt good for everybody to be in the same vicinity talking about these issues, and maybe alleviated some of that alienation that folks feel. There was a concern that, and I didn't actually know this, that absentee ballots had already been sent out, and so as you may be more informed than I, we will be sending out a separate a mailing of absentee ballots, and the fear was that perhaps that would feel redundant or people wouldn't be focused on it as much. There definitely seemed to be a clearer understanding of the district's financial responsibilities, which was extremely cloudy, which didn't necessarily result in people being more happy about it. There was a frustration with a lack of voice from our representatives and how that's being translated in Montpelier, and simply that this trajectory is potentially not sustainable. There was also questions about the buses. I find it interesting that everybody was talking about busing. I guess that would not have been one of my points, but busing was certainly an issue. As well as they're very concerned about the deferred maintenance, a theme I've heard again. They're very interested in addressing that issue and hearing it right from the horse's mouth as well. I obviously I'm not a great representative of knowing what's going on in the physical plants, and they would like to hear that directly. From my perspective, exponentially more of a positive tone. Obviously, I can't guarantee anything, but I think that people were feeling included and potentially excited about where we could be going.
Now he does.
Julie or Tony?
Go ahead, Julie.
So our main one, as usual, was communications. And basically it came down to there's no one strategy, hit them all. We had people who said they like mail, people who said they like Facebook, they never want a piece of paper ever again, et cetera, et cetera. So we all just agreed that the only way to do it is to just blanket the community with every possible way of communication, nothing specific. But they did want it to be simple. So that came across too. No, definitely we're looking for simple communication. The website came up as a big issue. That it was, so what I took away from it was that Our website is set up and made for our parents, not the community. So if our parents want to know what's happening with sports, they know where to go. If our parents want to know what's for lunch, they know where to go. But our community members do not know how to find the link, the budget, the this, the that. So it's deciding who's our website for, or if we're gonna make it for both, how do we do that better than what we're doing? Because people were very frustrated by finding things on our website. So that was a big topic of conversation. Let's see, looking for administration to take a pay freeze next year. Concerns about hire dates when we offer contracts in relationship to when we vote on the budget. How we offer contracts in January for our administration. I believe it's what, March for teachers?
Yeah, the reduction in force notices are.
Right, and how that's kind of like counterintuitive to actually passing a budget. Like, why would you do that before you passed a budget? So you're assuming that that's okay? So those type questions. And I did find out and learn that teacher contract timelines are negotiated, part of the contract, and administration and principals are statutory at state law. So it's not really our choice as to when we're doing these things, it's when everybody does them. So I think that helped. I didn't know that at the time though, but I found out that answer. Unfunded mandates. Some people were questioning whether PBL is actually an unfunded mandate. They want to know if we've been working on it for the past couple years, isn't it just part of what we do right now? Why is it still considered unfunded? We shared our numbers, they were happy with that. Tony shared some reopening stuff. Bill Canfield was at our meeting. I'm going to be honest, he shared very little. He had no answers. He basically didn't say much, but he was there, which was very nice. Trust, again, the topic of trust was brought up, that we have a lack of trust in the community, in our board, and in our ability to communicate how we feel as a board about what we're doing. They felt like the bond was not communicated by board members very well. They feel like the budget has not been communicated by board members very well, that we just kind of like do it at a meeting and they never hear it again. So not a lot of board communication outside of a board meeting. And we talked a little bit about repurposing buildings as to whether, or like when we can do that, what's the timeline, how would that affect our budget, why can we or can't we do it now? And that was, is anything else you can think of? I kind of went through all the bullets.
Well, I felt that they were very supportive of what we're doing.
Yeah.
But they want to know the information, otherwise they will not be supportive anymore.
Correct.
They want to know, where did we cut, what did we cut, if this budget doesn't pass, what's our next step? They want to know those things.
Yep.
Alrighty, that brings us full circle. Thank you, everyone, for sharing the input that you received. Before I go further, I just want to check with Patty Beaumont to make sure the online presence is good. Everyone can hear us okay online, for the most part, the board members when they speak?
I can hear some people when they speak to the board seem to be fine, and then the school was fine. Prior to that, we couldn't hear much of anything that was happening in the public comment section. Thanks, President.
Yeah, and I'm just going to rely upon you to speak up if you feel the online presence is just fading away. So keep us in the loop. Alrighty, so that brings us to the warning. Is that correct, Brooke?
Yeah.
So that was included in the packet, the updated warning. We're going to have an informational meeting on Monday, August 3rd. That's going to be virtual, correct?
I think we've warned it so it can be virtual and in person.
Okay.
I thought we were at the Castleton library. That's next before the budget.
Who's that?
Number 7. That was Angie. On your agenda, the library was before that.
Yeah, Angie, I had just mentioned that we would put some of those other items towards the end and focus on the budget and the reopening first.
That was to me, so I don't know who it was.
All right, so we're basically just looking for a warning to approve, or a motion to approve this warning.
If that's your desire, yeah.
I don't have the warning in front of me, but on the flyer, it says virtual. Doesn't say, so if we're gonna have it in person, it should say in person.
Well, if you want it virtual, I mean, it's up to you. We can change that to however you want to do it.
It has to be decided tonight because it's printed
It
in
has to
this.
be decided because it needs to go in the warning.
Okay.
Somebody with a hand raised.
Yeah, I see. I guess I'm fine leaving the print as is. I guess given the fact that it's a public meeting, the potential might exist that there would be too many people to show up in person. So while I certainly would like to continue with in-person board meetings, I mean, the fact that the informational meeting is remote is fine by me as the warning is written.
I mean, you do have 66 people online tonight, so we'd be over capacity if we were to have had everyone.
I have a question about
Yes. I did that,
If someone is
Joe.
speaking, we can't hear them. This is Patty.
Patty, there was a question from Joe Mark about the reorganization of agenda items. And at the beginning of the meeting, Joe, I did reorganize the agenda. Okay? So, again, we can warn this, we can make a motion to this warning, and then we can discuss it further. So is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the warning.
Peter?
Peter?
And I'll second that.
Peter, can you just restate your motion to include specifically Article 3, the dollar amount in total per pupil?
So, I move to make a motion. $26,402,586 for the warning of the school budget. Peter?
You want to resecond that?
I will resecond that. Glenn?
All right, is there any discussion about the warning? Any board members online have any questions or discussion about the warning? Okay, not hearing anything. Angie, I know you were very concerned about the size and the dollar amount of this latest round of cut. I think we all share that concern. We hope this is enough. We hope the public supports the budget. And I really think the board has done a great job in these last few weeks getting out and making contact with our community and taking feedback the best that we can. For everyone who presented here, the points, I would just encourage you to get those questions and comments to Brooke so that she can incorporate those into the frequently asked question document, which we can then use as a tool to, get that out one last time leading up to the vote.
Yeah, and I would note that over the weekend, I did update that document and sent it to you all today. So there might be some more we want to add after tonight, but we can do that.
So does that go into our website?
It is already on our website. We'll probably push it out on social media. Feel free to share it with whomever you would like.
All right, hearing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the motion to warn the budget warning, please, which is taking place on August 11th, please say aye.
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 And is there anybody opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right. All right, so now we'll transition into the second major component of the meeting, which is the reopening of schools. Go ahead.
Tim, what do we need a motion on the absentee ballots and in terms of the budget warning and then?
Well, that's related, so why don't you introduce that topic?
So, today, the Secretary of State's office came out with new guidance on elections. So if a municipal body makes a motion to allow absentee ballots, in this case for the budget vote, to be mailed to everybody who's already received an absentee ballot for the primary. But we would need to make a motion, you would need to make a motion here at the board meeting tonight to allow that to happen. Otherwise, taxpayers would need to request an absentee ballot independent of the primary ballot.
Okay, so I make a motion to have the clerks from each town send a ballot to people who have already asked for an absentee ballot for the August 11th vote.
A second.
Tony, second.
That was Julie first.
All right, if anyone did not receive that late attachment, are there any questions, any further discussion on this? Hearing none in person, none online. All those in favor of approving, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
And any opposed? All right, that motion carries.
No one wanted to keep back in that budget flyer too. I mean, nobody sent me any.
Let's push that to the end.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so now again, we're going to transition to the other major topic, which is the reopening of schools. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go to each of the building administrators and basically just query them about their thoughts. They've had a chance to read the guidance. They've met as a task force with administration. You know, what are their concerns, opportunities, challenges, what's doable, what just won't work. You know, our principals are on the front lines. They know our schools, our kids, our communities better than most of us, so their input is very important. So I will query each of the principals. I then would like Chris Cole, if you could speak to just some of the maintenance and cleaning and space and PPP initiatives that that you obviously are working with day in and day out. I'd like to hear from Chris Benway and what your concerns might be about equity in education, in-person versus remote, with the students that you work with. Casey is going to speak about different curriculum delivery methods that administration and the task force has been working on. I will then go around and ask each of the board members if they have any questions, concerns about the guidance or from what they've heard from anyone else who has spoken prior. In the end, in discussion with Brooke, you know, we really would like to have a couple motions tonight after this discussion. One motion is that the board supports the reopening plans that the administrators put in place, to which they're going to speak to tonight. More specifically to the moving pieces, the mechanics, who's attending, and the staggereds, and the start times, and the spacing, and the PPE, and all that stuff. This is our reopening plan. I'd like a motion to that effect. And then another motion is going to deal more specifically with the curriculum that Casey is going to discuss tonight, that we as a board support the direction that we're moving with an in-person focus delivery of curriculum with the ability and mechanisms in place to transition to another version if the situation on the ground should warrant that. So a lot to talk about. I do want to now, before we get into that, give the public a chance to speak. Brooke says there's 60-plus people online. I'm hopeful that some of those are parents. So at this point, I open up the meeting to public comment for anyone who has questions or concerns about, or points to make about reopening schools. Please speak up, somebody.
Hi, this is Tina Stevens. I'm from the state.
I'm sorry? Yes, who's this?
Can you hear me? This is Tina Stevens. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Tina. Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay, my big question is just to make sure that what's addressed within these school opening plans are, if a teacher tests positive, what the plan is going forward, especially for students within contact with that teacher, or if a student within one of the classes tests positive, what is going to be a notification and to a parent, especially if one of our kids are in the class. So I just want to hear what your opening plan will address for those questions.
Okay. And just to clarify, we're not going to answer every question as it comes up. We're going to consider that question, and then we will hopefully address those concerns as the various people speak. And if that question hasn't been specifically addressed, then there will be some follow-up to that point. Okay?
Sounds perfect. Perfect, thank you.
We have noted your question. Anybody else, please speak up.
Hi, Laura Dash Gardens from Castleton.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering about whether or not the district will be offering an all online plan for families who choose to do that, all virtual learning. And then also, maybe I missed it, if there was some kind of like digital survey that came around asking about intentions or concerns, like went around like in Rutland City.
All right, thank you. We've noted your question, and I think that will be addressed when the administrators speak. Are there any other questions? All right, going once, twice. Parents, if you have concerns, questions, please raise them now.
Tim?
Yes.
This is Steve Peter. What if we had them ask the questions afterwards, so that if the questions aren't answered, they can ask them?
Well, I thought about that, Rebecca. I just felt that this would maybe provide a better flow of thought, because, again, this is all a moving, evolving discussion and process. So I just want to...
But if you read in the chats, there are people asking us to actually let them ask questions afterwards. That's all. This is Becca again.
How many questions are there?
There's a couple of folks that would like to ask questions.
All right, we'll go with that then. We'll table the questions at this point, and then we'll circle back to the public after administration has made their presentation. Okay? Did someone speak? Okay. All right, so let's go around and hear what the administrators have to say. Let's start. Deb from Fairhaven, you're in the audience. Would you just mind coming up here and speaking into the microphone, introducing yourself?
Sitting in the car looking at me.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. The Slate Valley leadership team has been working diligently planning for the reopening of schools. We know that in-person learning is the optimal way to educate kids, and we're following the guidelines that the AOE has given us to the best of our ability. in our planning to return to safe in-person school in the fall.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but who is this?
This
We
is,
can't-
I'm sorry, this is Deb Inferno, the principal of Fairhaven Grade School.
Thank you.
Sorry. So again, you know, our team has been planning, we are meeting daily as a leadership team as part of this planning. At the building level, we've developed task force to address building-specific needs with the implementation of these guidelines. You know, again, we know that COVID is what's in charge here. And, you know, when the local data and science, if it happens to change, we will be ready and prepared to alter our plans to provide the best education that we possibly can.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, someone's speaking right now.
Hi. I'm gonna go unknown, but I really think that two things. First of all, you guys wanted to have questions addressed to you, but yet said we'll take it as a note. And secondly, I think everyone's getting a little uppity. The point of this is to focus on our children and our health, and everyone's getting a little too crazy. So we should all just relax, focus on the problem, and resolve it.
All right, unknown,
When you
thank,
answer the questions that the public is asking, you'll just say, we're gonna take a note of it and whatnot, address the situation at front. Okay, we are Americans, correct? That's it. I'm out, 10-4.
go ahead. Huh?
Keep going, Deb.
We're going to continue with Deb, the principal at Fairhaven Grade School. And again, questions, we will ask questions at the end of this presentation, okay? So go ahead, Deb.
So again, we are working on a reentry plan for our students to do in-person learning. I can certainly answer questions specific to Fairhaven Grade School if you would like. Every school is different in regards to implementing these guidelines because the structures of our buildings are very, very different. You know, there are some commonalities, again, and I don't know if you, Brooke, if you wanted to talk about the commonalities, which might make a little more sense first about what the plan is on the in-person learning plan that's common across all of our buildings, and speak to the individual differences, because there's many that are common. We're one system. So I'm not sure if that makes more sense, Tim, or
Well, I mean, you know your staff, you know your space, how you're going to move things around, how you're going to provide space in your class, how are you going to assess health every day as kids come in, you know, what's going to work for Fairhaven, what is just proving to be a bear to adhere to.
Well, I think the first thing we have to address is how kids are getting to school. At Fairhaven Grade School, what is slightly different than some of our other sister schools is that we have kids that walk to school and that congregate out front, and families that congregate out front. We have kids that ride the bus, and we have parent drop-off. So we're trying to work out a system of having multiple locations, accesses into the building. So typically, the buses used to drop off out back. When students ride the bus, they have to have their health checked prior to getting on the bus. So once they're on the bus, they're healthy, they're safe to come to school. We want to switch that and have the students on buses get dropped off out front and come in the building through our ramp entrance and have parent drop off out back. Because again, one of the procedures requires us to ask health questions and take temperatures at the point of contact before students enter the building. So if parents drop off out back, we would be able to do that in an easier way. And then at the front of our building, we would have walkers, 2 stations for walkers to have their health checked coming into the building. So there's multiple points of access into the building, so I have to schedule staff, it has to stagger. So we don't have groups of kids and families congregating together. So there's a staggered schedule there that's being built. I mean, there's multiple staggered schedules that are being built to accommodate this. The flow in our building, we're the only building that's 4 stories high. So I'm looking at schedules of how we go through the stairwells. One stairwell is an up stairwell, the other one's a down stairwell. So we don't have people crossing in the stairwells. Those are just some examples of things that we are scheduling and working out on routines and expectations in our building in order to accommodate the guidelines.
Okay. Well, those are great examples.
Any other specific questions about Fairhaven Grade School?
Not at this point in time.
Again, our task force is looking at building-wide safety protocol. We're looking at classroom-specific safety protocol. And then the other pieces we're looking at are scheduling of instruction. And then we're also having to look at instructional practice, because the setup of our school, of our classrooms, is very different in order to accommodate the physical distancing that's required or highly recommended. So small group instruction is not something that is going to be able to happen. So we have to look at how are we going to provide instruction in a different way. We're also personally looking at how do we get kids outside more and provide more outside classroom environments. And how do we provide shade? We don't have a lot of shade. One suggestion the task force today was seeing if we can bring groups of kids to our park in town, because that's filled with trees with shade. So we're really thinking outside of the box of all the different ways that we can provide instruction safely in an in-person environment.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, could I ask a couple questions about the plan in Fairhaven?
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead. Please just state,
So,
please
I guess
state.
I'm Alexandra, by the way. I have 2 children that go to Fairhaven. And I'm just curious, you know, when deciding what to do with our children in the fall, whether keeping them home or sending them to school, I would love more detail on what is going to be happening in the classrooms. I agree and can see how the smaller groups of students is not feasible within our school, but what are you going to be able to do to keep distancing or minimize exposure? I'd love to hear more detail, and if that's forthcoming in the near future, that's fine, but that's what I thought this meeting would be, was more details.
So again, we don't have all the details ironed out. The task force is still working. So in the classroom, we do have shifted furniture. We've removed tables and we've put in desks. And we have positioned desks as close to 6 feet distancing as possible. It's not possible in every environment to be 6 feet. That is a recommendation where feasible, and we're doing our best with that. All of our classrooms, the desks are spaced between 4 and 6 feet apart. So the students will be in their classrooms with their teacher and with their peers, and distance as much as we possibly can and what's feasible. We do recognize that, you know, we're talking about children and learning, and it's not going to always be possible to be 6 feet apart in our classrooms. Students, the governor's guidelines have also closed our cafeterias and our gymnasiums, so lunch will be, and breakfast will be served in the classrooms. And teachers will be having lunch and breakfast with their students, which I think also leads itself to a nice learning opportunity as well. PE class, we're looking at that being outside as much as possible because of that environment not being utilized. Does that help answer your question?
Your question? Yes, I do appreciate hearing the specifics, and I do just want to thank everyone who's working on this, because I know it's really an impossible situation that everyone's been put in, and I'll look forward to more details in the future.
And I will say it's a heavy lift, but teachers want to be back with students as well. Everyone is working really hard and teaming together and really trying to think outside of the box on how we can do this safely and also meeting the social, emotional, and academic needs of all of our students. And people are all pitching in really, really hard and want this to work.
There's a couple of questions in the chat.
For Fairhaven?
Yes.
I need my glasses.
Will the students be required to wear masks?
And that is one of the mandates required by the governor. So students will be required to wear masks, and all faculty.
And will there still be recess for kids?
Absolutely. Our goal is to get kids outside as much as possible. I just hope we continue to have this lovely weather that we have now. If we can have lunch outside, we'll have lunch outside. But yes, they will have recess. And they will have specials. And again, much of what I'm saying is the same in every single one of our buildings. So again, that's why I initially said it might be helpful to share the plan, because it does, much of it is the same in every single building.
And then there's another question around, will masks be provided? And yes, if somebody needs a mask, we will certainly be providing that. But if people want to come with their own, they're welcome to do that as well.
Masks are, and as we talk, masks are so different, and everybody, I don't know how many you all have tried, but I've tried many. And we don't want to impose a particular mask on a student, so if they found one that they really like and it feels good to them, we encourage students to bring their own.
And then there's another question about high school, but we'll save
We'll save
that
that.
for
Okay.
Phil.
Are there any other questions specific to Fairhaven Grade School?
There's one more question around, can face shields be used instead of masks? Currently the guidance says yes, but the state is releasing new updated guidance on August 1st. So the current guidance says yes.
Okay.
Could change.
And I'll just speak for all principals also. We encourage people to pick up the phone and give us a call. We're in the office, and if there's questions that people have, we would love to hear from you and help answer the questions that you may have. But please know that the guidance comes sometimes on a daily basis, so everything that we're saying now could potentially change. Again, we're not the ones completely in charge. It's really about what this virus does in our state, and we have to adjust accordingly.
And Tim, there's several more questions in the chat. Do you want me to answer them?
I do want to hear from the principal, so
Okay.
unless there's something specific to Fairhaven, I'm
Okay.
going to go on.
And then we can answer them.
Yes, we'll answer them at the
Okay.
end. So let's travel north at this point. Amy Roy from Benson, could you introduce yourself and just speak to your thoughts, your frontline impressions on the guidance and how it impacts your school in Benson?
I sure can, Tim. Good evening, everyone. I have to mute my camera or my good old OTT Wi-Fi goes down, so excuse me for not being more in person. Much like Deb said, we work daily as an admin team and then have a task force as well. We at Benson also are working on student arrival, busing, and car drop-off. We don't have a lot of walkers at Benson. We're fortunate in that we have exterior classroom doors, so we will be utilizing those as a drop-off point for our pre-K students, and that just frees up the flow a bit through the front of our building. We're also fortunate and have looked at operating students in pods. We have a first and second combined classroom. And much of what Deb stated is happening in our building too. We have gone through and looked at furniture in classrooms, and where possible, we have brought desks back in. We've also ordered some acrylic table dividers so that we can have just 2 students at a 6-foot table. And looking at out-of-the-box ways to use space in our building like we've never used it before. And much of this has to do with being able to give some of our students a different space to have their lunch, since everyone won't be using the cafeteria, but we want kids to have, something different to look at throughout the day. We're also very focused on outdoor time and as much outdoor learning as the weather will permit for us. One thing that we got a hold of from another state, where we have individual umbrellas for every child for portable shade and to reinforce some physical distancing for kids. So on those sunny days without trees on the playground, we can still go outside and spend a little more time out there. And then other things, just routines in the building, and much of this we've talked about as an admin team, routines for adults, minimizing people going to a teacher workroom, making sure copiers are being wiped down, not having the quintessential teacher mailbox happening anymore, how the front office operates. We will have staff and students be working with Pam Morrell, the admin assistant, through that wonderful banker's window that we got put in. So there's many benefits to some of the safety things that were put in our building that we're also now able to use during this time of COVID. A lot of our focus too has been on the social emotional learning of kids in those first few weeks when we come back, and easing our way back into academics. This will be a fall like no other for all of our students in all of our buildings. And so we're going to have to operate very differently than we have in the past. I'll reiterate what Deb said. Our staff is thrilled. They cannot wait to be back with the kids. And we have a solid plan in place we feel covers almost all the aspects that we know now, but we also know that we need to be nimble, as Brooke reminds us, that these things could change. So having, backup plans along the way helps. It's been a fantastic team effort. There's nothing better than being able to say, I have an attic full of desks and offer them up to another school that doesn't. So that's kind of where we're at with Benson right now. We are a smaller school. So as far as scheduling goes, it's been probably slightly easier than some of my counterparts have, but we've also been able to share our ideas about how we're scheduling. And I think just the conversations we're having and the approaches we're taking, and really, as Deb said, there's a lot of heavy lifting, but we're all doing it together with safety and the health and well-being of students, staff, and our families at the forefront.
That was great. Thank you, Amy. Are there any questions
Are
specific?
we ready for questions yet, or no?
I'm taking questions specific to Benson. Otherwise, all general questions will be addressed towards the end. So anything in the chat box or?
You guys had asked that before, so I didn't know if it was actually gonna happen at the end, or if we were just...
No, this isn't a game. No, all questions are going to be addressed, okay? So
I
just,
think umbrellas are the least of concern.
okay. Is this unknown?
Oh, yes, I got unmuted. I think we should focus on the kids. The umbrellas. Are you gonna get a 3-year-old in preschool to wear a mask for 8 hours?
That's a valid point.
Are you Houdini? What other measures have been taken to ensure the health and safety of our children? Besides umbrellas. I know that was a hot topic.
I think the administrators are addressing those as we go around, so please sit tight, okay? Are there any questions specifically for Benson? Benson parents out there, Benson community members? Anything in the chat, Brooke?
Not for Benson.
Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead, John.
While you have Amy there, I guess my only concern, Benson is very unique, and they do have, the luxury of having having doors to the outside from each classroom. With the events of, a couple years ago, are there any safety concerns with that?
Did you hear the question, Amy?
I sure did. We're still going to follow all of our Alice protocol. We'll be using the pre-K door for student drop-off and pick-up. That way parents have an opportunity with those younger students to still get in, those much-needed goodbyes, hugs and kisses that our littlest ones need. Other than that, our exterior doors will be used for the students to exit for recess time, and that will be the only other time they're used. And we will have adults on the outside of the building and in the field to receive the students before they leave the building.
Amy, this is
Thank you.
Becca St. Peter. The pre-K doesn't go to school for 8 hours though, does it?
No.
Our pre-K, no, and our pre-K will be operating slightly differently next year than the others, only because of our numbers, and will be Mondays and Thursdays, and they will have longer days than doing the 3 days. So that's one slight difference and variation we have at our school.
And the
But
length
it
is,
still will be 8 hours.
It is not an 8-hour day, no.
it'll be a 5-hour day for them.
Correct, I think Chris Benway's saying that it's going to be 2 5-hour days, yep.
All right, thank you, Amy. Patrick and Orwell, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to speak to about the situation in Orwell?
Hi, everybody. First thing I want to tell you is that the administrative team, we're all in on bringing kids back to school for in-person learning. As you've heard, we've been working feverishly, and I'll try to answer some of the questions that I heard previously come up in a generic way. We're all adjusting our arrival and dismissal times, and I think the goal here is to stagger the bus arrivals from the parent drop-offs, from the walkers. And upon arrival, all of our students are going to need a check, a screening, and a temperature check at the first point of contact. That is going to happen before kids get on the bus and with the walkers and the drop-offs as soon as they pull into the parking area. We're also looking at dismissal protocols to try to keep those kids separated. The idea here is when we talk about grouping of students, we want to keep them in certain groups. In Benson, where the total population is a little bit smaller, Amy's got some thoughts about teaming and grouping. In my school in Orwell, everyone is going to be grouped according to their class, because we have one class at each grade level. So those classes are going to remain isolated for the day, and the idea is not to mix and match them with other kids in the building. That means that the specialist teachers are going to be going into the classrooms. They're going to be having lunch in the classrooms. And the key here for recess, I heard recess mentioned, recess is going to have to be, kids need to stay in their groups. We can't combine cohort groups around the building. As far as physical distancing is concerned, all of us have evaluated our building space, our classroom space, and we want to maximize that social distancing consistent with those public health guidelines. Up in Orwell, we've identified a need to change out some of our furniture and adjust our classroom layouts to keep those social distancing guidelines. We're actually moving from tables back to desks, and I have to thank Mrs. Roy and Mrs. Prohoda from Castleton and Benson, because we're going to be getting some of their extra desks that they have in storage. We're also in the process, all of our schools, of developing protocols where students are not going to be sharing high-touch materials. When I say high-touch materials, I'm talking about books, computers, calculators, writing utensils, computers, headphones, and specifically art supplies. And then where we do have a situation where kids don't have their own, we really need to make sure that we appropriately clean, disinfect, and sanitize at the end of the school day. I know that I've been in on conversations with our building operations manager, Chris Cole, and the custodial staff in Orwell, and I know these conversations are going on around all the schools in the district, but we're really taking a look at how are we going to keep the school clean during the school day when the kids are in there. How are we going to keep the kids safe? How are we going to clean up after lunch when it happens in all of these classrooms? And those plans are being made right now. Communication, we haven't talked about that yet, but all of us are preparing to provide all of our families with clear and ongoing communication about what they can expect during, prior, and during the reopening. And this includes guidance on things related to health and safety. And we want to continue to engage with our families as the reopening moves forward to ensure that we can get feedback from you and that you're well informed. We want to make sure that these plans that we finalize, you can see them, and whether that's online or we'll send them to you. I spoke about recess. The last thing I wanted to mention, and I know Chris Cole can talk to this a little bit later, but each one of our schools is getting a separate isolation area in case a student or staff member gets identified with the virus. They'll be immediately isolated, and we'll have some protocols on how to deal with that. They're not made yet, but we're working on those. And I hope I've been helpful.
To me, you've been great. This is great. I'd love to hear from the principals. Are there any questions specific to Orwell in the chat room or online?
Nothing specific to Orwell.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. We'll move down to Castleton. Kim and Ben can kind of touch in and tag team a little bit on what they're seeing on the ground in Castleton.
Hi, I'm Kim Perhoda, principal of Castleton Elementary, Castleton Village. I'm not sure that there's a lot I can add to what my colleagues have already spoken about. I will just reiterate that we certainly are embracing kids coming back. We know the best way to educate our kids is in person with us. We are meeting daily, as my colleagues said. We also are reminding ourselves quite constantly that the guidance could change, and we're going to be very flexible with all of that. I also wanted to acknowledge the custodians because they've been right in the thick of it with us to talk about how we're going to keep the places clean. Specific to CVS, the front office has been redesigned and moved. As you know, there's only one main entrance there. And so as you walk in, we'll have one of those banker's windows that Eliza will greet people at. So we've done some reshuffling of the offices. And things particular to CES also involves doors. We have the luxury of having 3 doors, one by the music room, the main entrance, and one by the gym. So we'll be doing our staggered arrivals and dismissals at those 3 doors, and information from specific to our buildings will be coming out probably by the end of the week, if not the first of next week, to get mechanism for parent input and questions answered, and also things specific just for our building. So I don't know if we have questions for either of our buildings.
Are there any specific questions for Castleton?
Not in the chat.
Okay.
So I have a question. So CVS functions kind of like a high school in the fact that they change classes. Is that going to change?
Yes, they'll be in one room when they arrive, and the adults will be moving to them.
Okay.
I have another question for CEF, or from CEF. I did type it in the chat, and I'm just wondering how the special education services are going to be provided for the students at CEF when you mentioned that the intermingling with one another or kids from other classrooms can't happen.
Yeah, and I think that Kim is planning on Chris Benway to speak to some of those special ed services after the principals speak. I know that Chris and the other administrators, Bonnie Lenihan in our case, are working very hard, Lindsay, just to answer those exact questions. So I think Chris Benway will address those questions later.
Wonderful. I look forward to hearing from her.
All right, thank you very much. Let's return to home base here. Mr. Hall, the new principal at Fairhaven High School, if you want to come up. And I know the high school is a little bit different. There's certainly a lot of transition, so I'm sure there's some questions to that effect.
If I stand here, is that good?
That's good.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Hi, I'm Phil Hall. I'm the principal at Fairhaven Union High School. And much of what my colleagues spoke about that are happening at the primary school, their challenges and their planning also exist here. We obviously have some differences being grade 9 through 12. I would say the number one difference would be the high school schedule and therefore the high school experience. So something that we're trying to balance is obviously our first priority is the safety and well-being of our students and staff, but we are also very focused on maintaining that high school experience. And so many of my colleagues have talked about cohorts of students and trying to prevent those students from mixing. And we have really been forced to focus in some other areas because if we were not to allow our students to mix at all, then we would not be providing students with a high school experience. So while we have cut down or plan to, I should have started with this. Everything I speak of tonight is purely in draft form. We have a situation right now where our administrative team is working with both a district and a school task force. And so we are presenting ideas to these folks, getting feedback back, and then eventually we will be doing that with our parents and community too. So this is really baby stages of a plan, if you will. But right now we're looking at cutting down the number of classes in a day in order to reduce the mixing. We are not looking at eliminating the mixing of students because again, what that probably would look like would not be anything close to a high school experience. So that's the one of the major differences. We do feel like we are going to be able to, between our tweaks in the schedule, as well as a little bit of a different approach to attendance than our primary schools here in our district, we feel like we're going to be able to maintain 6 feet of distance pretty effectively. And so we will really have to focus a lot on using attendance and other measures to do some contact tracing should we have a positive case, but we just didn't feel like preventing the mixing of students was possible. So we're looking at a shortened school day as well, which makes, for the sake of staggering our transportation, which makes figuring out the schedule even more difficult. But we feel good about, the draft that we're going to be presenting this week. It is quite different than the draft we were presenting last week. And I'm sorry, Tim, I could stand here and talk for 3 hours, so I'm really not sure which details to get into.
That's good. Just.
You want to talk about half in and half out?
Yeah, so one of the major changes that has occurred in the last week in our planning is that we are currently planning to only bring half of our students into the building each day. And right now, we would make that division by grade, is what we're preparing to present this next week. So we would have 9th and 10th graders in one day and juniors and seniors in the next day. And we would continue to alternate until we got to a place where we felt like logistically to keep our students and our staff safe, we could potentially go full school. But we're looking at minimum a 3 to 4 week period of alternating days before we would feel like we had the data and the experience to be comfortable with bringing our entire body back in one school day. And some of our concerns there are around distancing, specific to the hallway, but also within classrooms. But logistically, we are being asked to do a full screening of each student every time they enter our building. And with a shortened school day to have to screen all of our students, we feel like the majority of our school day would be screening all of our students in terms of the hours in the day. So those are a few of the factors that led to that decision.
Okay. Thank you very much, Phil.
And then Phil, just, so alternating days, not, no, I'm not questioning anything, but.
Sure.
So alternating days, so synchronous on the off days, right? Not asynchronous. So in other words, still maintaining a schedule at home of contact with students. So it's not like free for all day, asynchronous, and at school, it's synchronous no matter what day.
Correct, and that brings up another good point. We're looking at a schedule right now that yes, we would be able to maintain for students while they're not here on those remote learning days, as we're going to call them. You know, with our original plan, should we have the need to go completely remote with our entire student body, we would still maintain the schedule. So one of our biggest goals, actually, is, as far as the schedule is concerned, is that it works for a student who is in person, but also for a student. So we would just stick to the same daily schedule either way.
Well, this is Becca St. Peter. I have a question. What about the kids from Stafford? How are you going to do that? Are you working with Stafford?
Yes, yeah. So the students who are attending Stafford are going to be on the Stafford program. We've been speaking with the principal or the director over at Stafford. There are some interesting pieces there where, you know, our school day is now going to be a little bit shorter than Stafford's, but we're figuring those things out. But we don't provide any coursework here at Fairhaven Union High School. All their coursework is at Rutland High School and then, you know, in the Stafford program. So you don't really have to adjust for those students, if that makes sense.
They would be expected to follow the Stafford schedule.
So would they go every day or every other day?
Yep, if that's Stafford's plan. I'm not sure that that's been totally finalized yet.
It has not.
Stafford's plan is currently every other day. As I understand, they're going to have a red cohort and a white cohort, and they're going to let us know when our students are expected to be there.
Because it's going to be interesting if we do 9, 10, and 11, 12, but it doesn't match up with their programming, if you will, like forestry and I don't know all of the programs offered. So I'm just wondering how we're going to let our kids know and the students in the community what day they are actually on, and if they are on an off day in high school but an on day for Stafford, do they have to get themselves to Stafford?
Our plan is to transport the students to Stafford on the days they need to be there.
Where will we hold them until they get sent to Stafford? That's my question.
Actually, that's an agenda item on my next task force meeting.
But the buses are going to be arriving at the same time that they did this year in the morning. So it's not going to be necessarily, we may not have an issue in the morning. It's the afternoon that's going to be a bit of an issue that we're trying to figure out. But those students would just follow the Stafford schedule and we'll make it work on this end and work with those students individually.
Yeah, what Fairhaven does has no bearing on what Stafford does. We just have to accommodate the transportation.
We also have to accommodate the students at the school before they get on the buses.
Right, the transportation. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to do that.
Yeah, I know. I heard you, Phil. I'm just reiterating that you guys are working on it. Thank you.
We are, thank you.
Are there any other questions specific to the high school and Mr. Hall?
Yes. So let's just use 9-10. So we're going to have them say, you know, this week it's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So in each grade, how many different cohorts are you going to have?
Well,
That was very difficult to hear. If you could possibly repeat the question, please.
Phil, you can repeat the question.
thank you. So the question was, in each grade, how many different cohorts will we have? And so I apologize if I was unclear, but we, you know, the nature of high school is such that, to be honest, we looked at, can we cohort freshmen? That was the first thing we looked at, knowing that freshmen would be the simplest group in terms of what they take for courses in high school. And with freshmen, it was not possible. So, you know, we are not planning to cohort students, because what we would have to do is we would have to track them. And I'm trying to figure out the easiest way to explain this. So essentially, if you were an honors English type of student, you would also have to be an honors math type of student. You'd also, you know, we'd be taking your abilities in one area and sort of tracking them across your entire schedule. And we made the decision not to do that. So we are using, you know, bringing in half of our students in our nice big hallways, in our big classrooms, and really focusing on making sure that we are social distancing. And that, you know, in combination with the mask requirement, we feel like we're going to be able to provide, you know, a safe educational environment for students, where you know, we can't necessarily adhere to what is a strong recommendation of this not mixing students. You know, we have not figured out a way to do that. So we're looking at other strategies, and I could list quite a few, but you know, can we reassign teachers to different rooms in order to cut down on travel in the hallway? And we're looking at other sorts of strategies, because to have cohorts of students at the high school level, we would really be causing a detriment to really every single student's experience.
So they would be more grouped by their academic achievement than in a grade than.
Yeah, we're really not.
Because I mean, when we look at last year, okay, we have kids that showed up one day a week, kids that like worked very hard and did very well. I mean, are we making efforts to, you know, acknowledge them and not hold back the kids
Yes,
that?
and that's why we're not going to put our students into groups that don't work.
Okay. Thank you.
So, you know, for example, rather than trying to group all of our freshmen, what we're doing is we're manipulating our schedule to have the smallest possible class sizes, so that we can make sure while they're in class they're socially distant, rather than looking at ways to keep them in one group as they move about the day.
Thank you.
Another question for you online. How will you accommodate students who are enrolled in classes out of their specific grade level?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a trick, but it's possible with what we're doing, because our teachers will be in school every day. You know, if you're referring maybe to a sophomore who is in who are in classes with juniors and seniors, they will still be scheduled into that class on the day that they are here. As a matter of fact, they might get quite a bit of attention if there's only a few sophomores in that class. They'll still go to that class on the day that they're here, and they will still have, you know, that synchronous time on the days that they're not here to engage in whatever's been asked of them. Did that answer your question?
I think possibly, but there's some more questions. Will course options be limited to accomplish this, or will all courses continue to be available?
So in our current plan, all courses are, you know, that was a goal of ours, knowing that students have already made selections as far as what they'd like to take next year. So in our current plan, we are able to offer the same courses over the course of the year. So the plan is to take year-long courses and semesterize them, or make them half a year. And actually, by doing 4 courses per semester in a day, we get up to students being able to take 8 courses over a year, whereas last year they took 7. So in theory, a student could not only, you know, choose more classes, but could also potentially earn more credit.
And that's the beauty of synchronicity. Being synchronous means that even if you might have 2 kids in person, you could have 5 on Google Meets, and then the next day it might be vice versa. The 2 are at home Google Meets and then 5 are in the classroom. So when you're synchronous, that still means that the class happens at that same time.
Yeah, there's another question here around band and chorus being available.
Band and chorus will be available. They will certainly look a lot different, and that is one of the trickiest things to figure out, and I don't have much of an answer other than it will be available. They both will be available.
It may look very, very, very different as we're not allowed to have anybody practice together.
There's a lot of spit.
So there's a lot of
Band and
regulations
chorus.
around that. So that's honestly probably one of the more complicated ones to figure out, but we're committed to figuring it out.
No.
Is it going to alternate, so obviously with 5 days and one on, one off, is it gonna alternate and rotate, so like A week, B week, or how does that look?
Yes, so if in week 1, freshmen and sophomores have 3 days, and juniors and seniors have 2, it would flip-flop for the next week. And that's, I'll be honest, that's quite different than what a lot of high schools in the state are looking at doing. We have a lot of high schools that are prioritizing certain grades. We have a lot of high schools that are not, bringing students in 5 days a week. But we thought, with not being able to safely bring all of our students in every day, we wanted to, at the very least, maximize the days we were bringing each student in.
So there's a ton of questions in the chat. They're just, they're universal to all of the schools. There's, so we can do them at the end, or?
Yeah, I know, I'm conscious of time and daylight, so let's let Phil get back to his seat for now.
Nice job. I just can't let yours.
Chris Cole, why don't you come up? And I know the principals have already spoken about a lot of things, but maybe you could focus on some of the key topics. We haven't talked about filtration system in school. We haven't talked about procurement of PPE. Will it be available? Are we buying it from the state, a third party? Anything else on your mind that you feel hasn't been touched by an administrator?
Yeah, certainly. So some of the things we're doing in the operations department, principals touched on schedules, cleaning schedules. So we will have a formal schedule of how we're going to do the cleaning at each building. I know one of the questions that I've been hearing out in the community is, are the playgrounds going to be open again for student use? The principals are working on some kind of schedule that we can work on. So maybe one group uses the playground one day and we rotate, so we have time to clean in between. So I know the principals are working on that. So we do plan on having those open with cleaning in place for them. One of the things we was touched on earlier was isolation rooms. So in each of the school nurses' offices, we're building an isolation room that'll have its own ventilation system. Outside air, exhaust air will all be contained within the nurse's office area. So currently, we're working on those in all of the buildings. Principals have been involved in that process from the beginning. So all those rooms they're all adjacent to the existing nurse's office. So some rooms we had to put in new doorways, some we had to close in some doorways. So we're working on that part right now. Ventilation in general, we've contracted with a engineer to kind of go over all of our plans and make sure our ventilation systems are where we think they're at. So he's writing a report for us that we can review that and make sure all of that stuff is in order for ventilation systems. Hand sanitation station, so each of the entrances that we use for the morning will have a sanitation station. It'll be some version of hand sanitizer. We've been getting hand sanitizer from multiple different vendors. Get that in stock. Some of the PPP that Tim was asking about. So the state of Vermont is going to provide masks for all the staff members. I'm not sure when that's coming in, but the state is supposed to be supplying those for these staff members. I know Brooke is working with Deb Hansen from the nursing end on getting more of the PPE for more that deals with the nursing staff. I don't know if you.
And
have-
also, yeah, so we're working on that, and many of the companies now are prioritizing shipments to schools. So I think we feel pretty confident that we can get the materials that we need. We're also have a lot of volunteers that are working to donate masks to the school for students. I think right now we feel pretty confident about getting the supplies that we need to start up. I mean, back in April, you know, when we were talking about running summer programming, we didn't have supplies, but now we are seeing the supply chain open up.
We don't have as much access to our traditional hand sanitizers that we've used in the past, but there is plenty of supply of other products on the market that we've been able to get and are in the process of getting now. So I think we're in pretty good shape for where we are in operation.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Chris, do you want to come up? I know there was already a question about special ed services, and maybe just speak to the challenges you see in-person versus remote when it comes to the delivery of those services.
Sure, and I would just remind folks that we didn't get to make IEP decisions last spring about change in placements or what the placement would be, because those decisions were all forced upon us by the stay-at-home orders. And so usually teams consult and have a conversation about what is the least restrictive environment. We didn't have that opportunity because the environment was the same for everybody. It was forced to be remote for all of us. So with that said, we recognize that because of that forced move for everyone's safety, there are populations of students that receive special education that were underserved during that time period. Students who need personal care, students that need behavioral intervention, and students that need direct instruction from a teacher to obtain their specialized instruction. Some of those had to go by the wayside for a period of time because we did not have an opportunity or the ability to provide in-person services. So right now, a lot of our heavy lifting is yet to begin. We're doing a lot of planning, but the definition of special education is to give students that are eligible what they need in order to access their general education program. Until we define all the ins and outs of the general education program, then we can define, okay, now that we know what general ed is going to look like, what does this particular student need in order to access that program, and how will those services be delivered? So we're working closely with all the administrators. We meet every day as special ed administrators with our entire leadership team, and then following those meetings, we meet separately to address the issues related to special education. In the coming weeks, we will be meeting and talking with every single family on an IEP to revisit and rewrite the IEP as well as the distance learning plan. Last spring, we had to immediately put in place individualized distance learning plans that were an add-on, a supplement to the IEP. And so we need to be prepared to be running in person. We also need to be prepared and have a plan in place if we were forced into a remote situation. As I said, we recognize that some kids were underserved, and that even in some of the schedules that are being developed where there might be an A day and a B day, we may still have some special ed students that are coming in 5 days a week in order to obtain their necessary services based on their unique needs. We're going to be doing that in a variety of ways. In some cases, we may be able to push in some cases, we may be able to pull out. In some cases, we may be able to pull 2 kids from one classroom and work with them in person while we're supporting 2 students with another person accessing that same instruction remotely, maybe with a support person. We may still have some coming in and added in from home. So there are going to be lots of different options. A lot of those have yet to be determined based on what's happening in the general ed class. We need to know that in order to define, okay, now how do we meet this child's special education needs, their unique needs, so that they can access what's going on in that class. So a lot of our work is happening now, and a lot of it is going to be happening right up till the start of school, because we need to have the individual education plans in place to the extent that we can for the first day of school.
So do you feel in-person education is the best for your students and your
absolutely and unequivocally that I think we all recognize the in-person services are absolutely what our kids need the most. And if we can be doing that in a safe way and in accordance to the guidance, that's where we want to be. Our kids need the direct instruction. It's really hard to do behavioral intervention remotely. It's really hard to do specialized instruction remotely, especially because of the children's needs. They may need additional adult support even to access something online. And that's another huge equity issue. Not all of our kids have the same level of supports at home because parents are working or, tending to 3 other children. There are lots of different reasons why there's a lot of inequities in that. So to the extent that we can, we absolutely want to bring kids back and be able to provide those services.
So I know there was one question in the chat box. I think Chris probably addressed it. Brooke, is there anything else that you see?
There's a ton of questions. So
I know, we're not going to be able to do all these questions.
And I would just say that we are constantly getting guidance as well. We expect guidance this week, in particular to special ed. The guidance changes very rapidly. I shared with the administrative team an example of being in a meeting until 3:45 on a Thursday because I needed to have the information for an 8 a.m. meeting on Friday. I got that information. I attended the 8 a.m. meeting. I shared it out. At the end of that meeting, we went to check calendars to see when we could meet again, and the information I had received on Thursday had already changed. So that's the rapidness in which our world is changing and those recommendations and guidance. So we are doing the best we can to keep up with it, and we are coming up with multiple plans for each student based on the multiple scenarios that may be presented in each building.
Wow. Great.
Tim, I've tried to answer questions in the chat as they've come up. I have not gotten to all of them though. So.
Are there any key questions? I mean, they're all important questions, but are there anything that jump out at you, Brooke, as something we can address now?
Just that information will be forthcoming to parents from the district tomorrow. I plan to send out a communication. Individual principals plan to follow up with the building specifics either later this week or Monday at the latest. And then also this week, we are having all our school staff call every family in the district to talk about, just the plan for reopening school as well as transportation. So
That's a in-person phone call? You're going to call everybody?
we're gonna try to call every family in the next week and have because we sent a survey out in June and we only received 134 responses out of 1,300. So if we really want the information, we really need to call.
Brooke, this is Becca St. Peter. One thing that hasn't been brought up is the work-based learning and any kids who signed up for that. How is that going to be handled?
So Casey and I were just talking about that today. That's going to be on a case-by-case basis. We're working through that. We have businesses that, may be concerned about partnering, so we're really trying to work through that. I don't have an answer on that. And the survey went out in June. It was towards the end of the school year.
So to put it in perspective, how many students are part of work-based learning? Like how many students have requested that in the high school? What do you think, Casey? Do you know? Or
25.
25, kind of give or
25.
take? So 25 students can be dealt with on an individual basis based on what their choice was for work-based learning and how that can or cannot happen based on who, okay.
Yeah.
I was in contact
Because
with
if
the
they can't
instructor.
happen, they need to change their schedules now to have actual learning happen in the school. So we need to know those parents sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we're trying to do the best we can. As you can imagine, we have to change every single thing in regards to how we do school. So right now, we're trying to focus on the big structure and then make the other decisions along the way. We are not going to have every answer tonight, unfortunately.
And Becca, just specific to your question, this is Casey O'Mara, Director of Curriculum. There's more to work-based learning than the field experience. That is something that is invaluable in that opportunity. But I did speak with the instructor today, and we're actively planning on kind of remote options if employers aren't able to have a student be on site directly. But there's a whole host of things that are involved in that curriculum. So if a student wanted to continue, there will be opportunities for them to continue and wouldn't have to change a schedule. I'm going to roll.
Thank you.
You bet. I'm going to go next. So something that I was happy Brooke did bring up, Laura Desjardins had asked a question about had we surveyed folks. And so we sent the last question of our survey in June, in June, which unfortunately only 134 families filled out. Asked them to rank order what their preferences would be, knowing all the CDC information that we had at that point and the AOE's recommendations. And it was clear, 3/4 of the respondents said that they wanted in-person, followed by a hybrid, which we had defined as some sort of in-person and out-of-person, which is similar to what the high school is designing, with the final option being folks that wanted to completely explore learning remotely. So we felt we have a responsibility when asking for information to respond to that information, and therefore we started to plan what it would look like to be in person and then potentially have some other structure that Phil and the high school have explored. As well, I gathered data starting in April from our educators. It's very clear that they are skilled at delivering instruction in an in-person setting, and when we had to move into an emergency situation, it felt like an emergency. And so we are going to be better when we do have to move into those settings, if we have to in the future. But our priority, again, in terms of how we've been trained, is to, even with social distancing and wearing masks, having students present in our classrooms so that we can approach content and skills that are expected at the specific grade levels. As you heard, all of the priority is focused on safety and social and emotional well-being, and that is so that we can be in person for as long as absolutely possible. So in the order of having safety be number one, followed by social and emotional well-being of students and adults, then we approach the content and skills in the classroom. If we tried to reverse that in any way, we would not see ourselves being as successful as we will be moving into the in-person setting. Because we're prioritizing the in-person work, I've laid out 6 different areas that are broad in their scope for us to design as a district task force and then be flushed out at the building level. And those include kind of an advisory or a way to connect, making certain that students feel like they have a hub or a home within the structure that they're now going to experience, because it is not going to be what they experienced before they left. Followed by, what is the role of a student in learning, both in this new world that we experience in person, as well as potentially something that's not in person. Followed by the role of a teacher and what that is going to look like and how to prepare, as well as the role of a parent or guardian. Followed by then how we're going to assess work, how that looks and feels different in some cases in person as it compared to what students may have experienced after March 18th or experienced prior to that, and then followed by attendance. We also recognize the uniquenesses, as you've heard from building principals, about special areas. So that's art, music, gym, different from perhaps in some cases based on the structure of a school, how that would compare to classroom teachers. At this point, we've workshopped that as a district leadership team, and I'm going to present it at the next district task force team, and then it'll make its way with greater specificity into the buildings, and then will be a supplement to a faculty handbook and then a student and parent handbook.
Are you done? Or pausing?
I can keep going.
I can keep going. Okay.
I promised Tara that I'd be short.
Oh, wow. It's not as easy to crawl into bed, is it, Tara?
Any questions in the chat? Any big ones?
Yeah, there's a lot of
right.
questions.
Is there any that say Casey?
Yeah.
This is Angie. And one of the questions I see that I know a lot of people have been asking is, will remote learning be an option through the school to parents that do not want to send their children either all of the time, is there some flexibility there that say the middle school age children or even the grade school, can they have sort of that part-time schedule that we're talking about for the high school?
Currently in our draft plan, it is not an option. However, it's certainly an option for students that are health impaired, and certainly will work with families, if they have, documentation from a medical provider on that. Certainly, if a student is homesick, as we expect increased absences in general, as we don't want any students in the school with any symptoms, really, of anything, we are prepared to provide some asynchronous learning in that case. However, right now, a fully remote option is not on the table. That being said, when we call parents in the next week, we're hoping to have a conversation and really gauge where parents are. For us, it's really important to hear from all parents, and to just simply send out another survey, when typically when we send out surveys, we're only getting 10 to 20% of people responding. It's just not a great indicator, so we really want that personal connection with families.
Also, Angela, we learned a lot when we went remote quickly, and so something that I'm asking is that we use learning management systems across our district. So for K2, we're going to use something called Seesaw, which we didn't have last year. And then 3 through 12, we're going to use Google Classroom. And so we're going to make certain that we're using that actively while we're doing in-person for all sorts of reasons. So one of my mantras to educators has been we have to work smarter. And so that'll be a part of our daily routine, weekly routine.
All right, thank you, Casey. Is there any members of the public out there who would like to speak up with a question? We've been tabulating all the questions that have been coming in via the chat function. Is there anyone at this point in time who would like to ask an out loud in-person question? Please speak up.
I just have a question. I'm curious. Laura Desjardins, sorry, Castleton. When a family chooses to homeschool a child, how does that does it, and if so, how does it affect the funding that the school would receive for that child, like from the state? Thank you.
So, if a child, if a family's choosing homeschooling, that child would be unenrolled from the district, so it would impact our average daily membership, which would eventually impact our budget. Yes.
So Laura, again, if you don't mind me asking a follow-up, if the district is at all concerned about lacking a full digital synchronous or asynchronous, whichever way different districts are choosing, lacking that option, they may lose students to the homeschool option that they could otherwise keep and then get funding for, versus losing money in a year when we don't have I'm just wondering if that's a thought at all.
It's Brooke again. It absolutely is a thought, and I think until we have the individual feedback from each family, it's going to be difficult for us to know which families and how many are actually considering that.
Can you just speak to some of the requirements or obstacles to become an official homeschool provider? I mean, it's not as easy as just checking a box.
If a family is interested in homeschooling, they need to submit a plan to the Agency of Education, complete by August 1st, which is completely independent of the school district.
August 1st.
August 1st is the deadline for homeschooling.
Brooke, this is Becca. One of the parents or somebody in the chat said that they that remote learning was being strongly considered. Do we want to speak to what we talked about in the task force about how our teachers are working for remote learning first and then adapting it to the school so that all bases are covered?
Say that again. I'm reading the chat and trying to listen to, go ahead.
During the task force, we talked about how the teachers were working towards using remote learning first and then adjusting it to in-person teaching so that all of our bases were covered once August hit. So it's not just a one-sided cube that the teachers are working on. It's multifaceted learning that can be and will be adjusted to whatever the recommendations are come fall.
Correct. So, yes, so we're building a system to work in a remote environment if necessary. Remote learning is the heaviest lift in terms of instruction, and so we're working with teachers to build their instruction in the remote environment. Correct. Casey, did you want to
No,
hear?
I was just going to say, so that's what we came off of. So part of what we spent our time in June when we had additional in-service days was reflecting on what it is that happened, what it is we learned from it, and then how we could plan to be better. And so from that, there was a lot that was taken, and so we've looked to improve our performance in that area, and a lot of it has to do with the synchronous nature of having something that is remote, but does have a schedule and does have attendance and does have other pieces that we didn't necessarily have time to reflect on when we went into the emergency situation. So we started building and focusing on that sort of work, knowing that we've done the in-person before. That's what we're trained to do. It's not going to look like it did before, but that's our comfort level. When many of us student taught, it wasn't in a remote setting. It was in an in-person setting. So although we're going to have to practice social distancing, we're going to have masks, we're going to have to reconsider how it is we engage students, it is a familiar place. This remote experience that we had was 3 months, and it was not a familiar place. So that's where we started to reflect and plan as we approach the fall.
Glenn, did you have a question? No. All right. At this time, go ahead.
I just want to correct my home study information. The minimum course of study is, due on the website by August 1st, but you can, with parameters, you can submit on a rolling basis.
Okay. I want to take a 2-minute break, stand up and stretch. It's not going to be longer than that. I just want to confer with Brooke just to see what the key points are here to finish this meeting off and do it in an orderly fashion. So I just need a couple of minutes, please.
Yeah,
All right, we're going to bring this back in and try to finish up in an efficient manner. Chris, Brooke, we're all set. We're here with the remote people still? Everyone's good? Okay. All right. So I think this is our first time meeting in 4 months, and there's a lot to talk about. And again, I'm trying to do the best I can to hear everybody. This is important stuff, and a lot of people have questions and concerns. We've addressed some questions. There's a lot of questions that are still in queue in the chat function. We're not going to get to all those right now. As I mentioned, they've been documented. Brooke has answered some online, and we will take those questions and put them into a document with the answers. I'm sorry we can't specifically address every chat question right now, but time is just not allowing for that. To finish this meeting off, there's a couple more points. We're going to have a motion here momentarily to support the plan presented to us tonight by administration. We do have to look at the school calendar. We do have to look at the letters of intent, and we do have to look at the, what else?
Retirement incentive.
The retirement incentive. So,
And the library.
Library request?
We can mention that. Joe and Nancy Mark have left. I will email them.
They're online.
Oh, they are online? Okay.
At home and got online.
Okay. Hopefully they're wearing slippers with a cold drink, something. All right, so let's summarize. We just heard the plan that our team has in place to safely reopen our schools with in-person learning. It's still in process, obviously. Guidance is changing all the time. Communication is key. People in the public, I encourage you to contact your principals, email, call. Everyone is available to answer your questions. Julie.
So just in summary, I'd like to make a motion for us as a board to consider tonight to approve the pre-K through 8 model of in-person schooling to begin when school starts, and the 9 through 12 alternate day model to begin when school starts. And that's my motion.
Second, Peter Stone.
Is there any discussion from board members? Go ahead.
This is Angie. I'd like to have a discussion about the remote piece for the younger grades. I'm sorry, I got kicked off. I'm back on, so I missed part of the discussion. I think it's really important that we allow options for families at that younger grade to be able to make decisions within the family to decide what they're going to do. I really think it's going to help our numbers of allowing people to say, I don't feel comfortable having my kids in school 5 days a week for a variety of reasons. Some people, I've heard a lot of people say that they don't want to have their kids in school wearing masks all day, or I just don't want my kids in school 5 days a week because of X, Y, or Z. I really think that we need to provide options to parents.
Thank you.
Yep. And this is Tanya. I also wanted to echo that. I've been having quite a few conversations with folks and my own thoughts about safely returning to school. And I was assuming there would be more of a chance as a board to discuss the options going forward of fully hybrid or remote and in person. And I feel like there are, I think I'm really glad to hear that folks planning that deep dive of talking to parents. I think that we will hear that there's lots of families really grappling with how they're going to handle it and considering homeschooling and, whether or not that impacts our budget seems like an important consideration. So I certainly, echo that I want to have a bigger conversation about that. There's so much new information coming out. Now they're saying possibly it spreads more among 10 and up, so that's younger. It's just, it's just changing so quickly. But I appreciate also the enormous work that the principals and administration and everybody's doing to try to make this happen fully in person.
Thank you, Tanya.
Sure.
Just, you only want to hear from board
No,
members?
this is just board. Peter?
You said that the principals will be sending out specifics for their own school to parents this week or by Monday? Did I get that right? Okay. I just want to.
Yeah, I'm gonna send out the district information tomorrow, so it's really high level, and then the principals, I'll send out the building specifics, and then we'll be following up with a phone call. And right now, I would just preface this as this is the draft recommendation of the direction we're headed in the fall. Next week, new guidance could come out and change everything again, I think.
Well, I was just checking because I've had a lot of parents just wondering if school's going to reopen.
Yep.
So I just that way, we get that information out to the parents and be good. Even though it's a draft, I understand that. Okay.
Are there any other comments from board members?
I think it's tough to vote on this particular issue until we have the feedback from the parents, because if there's a parent that's concerned about transportation but is limited because they work and they can't get to the shortened schedule, and they're scared about putting their kids co-mingled on a bus for X amount of time, whatever that may be, I think that will drive additional conversations, because we're not a district that is urban. We are very much a rural district. So I think it's a little early to say that that's the model. I think it's great to work to that, and I would support saying, let's work to that model the best we can. But if we say and vote on it today to accept it, do we have time to get all of the folks back together to walk ourselves back out of that, is my question.
Well, it's a draft. They need guidance from us.
So can we rephrase that motion to be that we will support the continuation of drafting that model instead of saying straight up accepting?
I think there's a motion on the floor. We can vote on the motion, and if it doesn't carry, you can certainly make a motion to that effect. Are there any other questions or concerns?
Sam, who was that spoke last?
Becky Spears.
Thank you.
Jim, this is Patty. Could you please repeat the motion? Sorry, it's been so long I forgot it.
It's all right. It's a motion to accept moving forward with the plan, the guidance to have in-person school pre-K through 8, 5 days a week, and 9 through 12 on a alternating schedule.
Okay, so we're not entertaining two other items on the letter that was that Julie who just made that motion?
Yes.
So it's just about the back-to-school in-person portion of the letter that will be received on July 13th, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from board members?
I agree with Becky Spears. It should be worded as not a definite.
I don't read what Julie said in her motion as a definite. We're approving the plan that the administration has articulated tonight, how they're preparing to safely reopen schools for in-person education. And I think Casey already spoke to the idea that our teachers are being trained and have the resources and means to adapt to individual student needs, depending whether it's a temporary absence, a normal illness, or an extended time away from school. So I don't...
There be something said about the ever-changing situation in the state. There needs to be some flexibility in it. I don't think there's as much flexibility in the wording as there needs to be.
Yeah, this is Tanya, I agree, and also, if we, the phone calls to parents seem like a key to bring that information back since our survey results were so weak. So to go forward with this vote without hearing that deeper information from parents feels premature.
And I think because so many people are focused on the August 1st deadline of whether or not to homeschool, I think that we're going to push people in that direction.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions from board members? And again, I'll call the question, and if certainly you do not approve, you can say nay, and this discussion can continue. So the motion's on the floor, it's been seconded. All those in favor of supporting the motion brought forward by Julie to support the administration's plan for a safe return, reopening our schools, in-person education, please say aye.
Aye.
And let's just do a roll call on this one. So Bonnie Lenahan, I can just read off the hand raising here. Tara Buxton is a yay. Julie Finnegan is a yay. Peter Stone, yay. Glenn is a yay. John is a yay. Rick is a yay. Josh Hart is a yay. Michael Batch is a yay. Tony Lobdell is a yay. Are there any other yays coming in remotely?
Patty, I believe.
Patty Beaumont.
Patty Beaumont is a yay. And now I'll call those who oppose or abstain. Please speak up with nay.
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 And we have one over here.
And Becky.
Okay, so Bonnie Lenahan, for the record, the nays, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Rebecca, Angie, Tanya, and Becky Spears. So that motion carries.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep, thank you. All right, so the school calendar is related to this, so Brooke, why don't you present what your, the school calendar?
Yeah, so, tonight prior to the meeting, I sent you an updated school calendar. In order to prepare for the reopening of school, I mean, I think Chris Benway spoke to it earlier. We need to rewrite, all of the IEPs within the district. There's significant amount of planning that has to happen before, we welcome children back into the schools. So, that being said, we are asking for the start date of school to be August 31st. That will allow us actually 8 in-service days, 2 of which would be floating days to have teachers come in, work with the custodians and principals to redesign their classrooms, to meet with the guidelines put forth by the Agency of Education. The other days will be focused on training. They will be focused on IEP and plan development, working on the different procedures and protocols that need to be in place in each of the buildings. We also, in this calendar, would be eliminating all in-service and half days during the school year. So, therefore, you know, we realize that it's going to be difficult for parents. So trying to remove another obstacle for parents. And I'm not sure, I know I said it in the chat, but the school day we're planning on shortening by 1 hour and 15 minutes. It would be pretty similar in the morning if you're a busing student, but in the afternoon it would definitely be shortened for departures. And it's also because we're having teachers in the classroom with students, we're having contractual issues with planning time, so really making sure that we're meeting everyone's needs. And we also need additional time during the day for sanitation. So that's all wrapped into the school calendar conversation. I did talk with the union around the school calendar piece today, so they are on board with that. And if Stafford starts earlier than August 31st, which we suspect it will start August 26th, we are committed to getting the students there on, you know, whatever that Stafford schedule is, so.
All right, so Brooke had included an attachment with the updated calendar late in the day. Let's make a motion to accept the calendar and then we can discuss it further.
So moved, Glenn.
Second, Julie.
Any other questions or discussion points about the calendar? Mike?
It's Patty. I have a question about how paraeducator contracts are impacted by this.
So, we would be bringing we still have a set number of days in the paraeducator contract that we are expected to be paying paraeducators for. We would be bringing them in for additional training as well. So their school year would start August 21st, as they're going to be instrumental in helping some of these systems work. So we want to make sure that they have adequate time and adequate training alongside the teachers. So there would be no decrease in paraeducator days.
Mike?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Just a comment. And that anything that's reducing student contact days or student contact hours is a bit of a concern. So from a good negotiating standpoint with unions and contracts moving forward, is this setting precedent? And I understand this is not a normal year. There's other things that we have to take into consideration. But is this, or can this be done without precedent moving forward?
I think for this case, and Kim Lucci is certainly on the call. I mean, she was on the call. I don't want to put her on the spot, but I think we would be planning on signing a side letter of agreement in regards to this, and certainly we could put in there that it's non-precedent setting.
Okay.
That this is due to
Extenuating circumstances.
circumstances outside of all of our control.
Okay. Excellent point, Mike.
Becky, you had a question? No? Okay. All right, hearing no other questions on the calendar. All those in favor of approving the calendar outlined by Brooke, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Are the marks still online?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna quickly do the letters of intent and then we'll get to the library, okay? So I think there's 2 letters of intent, if someone has those printed off.
Does anyone have them?
Tara's prepared?
Yeah, I do. So, letter intent for 2021 school year. I'm gonna butcher his last name, Stephen. How do you pronounce that, Brooks? Mogbigo?
I'm probably gonna butcher it too. Samavigo?
Samuvigo?
No.
Mr. S. Special educator, $53,391. And then we have Amanda Keller, school nurse, $43,520.
So second, Julie.
Are there any questions or any administrators want to comment on those positions? I think we've already talked about the nurse. That was decided at the last meeting to go ahead with that hire.
And then Stephen would be replacing one of our instructors at Castleton who took the position elsewhere.
Okay. All right, hearing no other comments online. 1, 2, 3. All those in favor?
What was just being said by Chris?
Chris was just clarifying that the first person mentioned for the letter of intent was replacing a special educator at the high school. Oh, at Castleton, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yep. So all those in favor of approving those 2 letters of intent, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay, so let's move on to the Castleton Free Library. I'll have Chris Cole briefly introduce the topic, but again, I just want to say to Joe and Nancy, I know you were here earlier today. You're now in person online. I apologize for the delay in addressing this agenda item. I realize that you have some urgency that you're working with on your timeline as well, but I'm sure you understand there's a lot of important stuff going on here tonight. So Chris Cole will just kind of introduce the subject matter, and then we can call you in for questions or comments, okay? Thank you.
So the Castleton Library is requesting that the school board do some work with them on adjusting boundary lines between the Castleton Village School and the library, the town library. They're looking at doing some renovations, putting in a handicap ramp and some other changes to the side of their building. So similar to what we did at the Fairhaven grade school with adjusting the property boundary, this is a similar request that the library is making, which is actually beneficial to both the school district and the library. There is I believe it's a 500-year lease that's currently in between the 2 properties. So some of the school is in that 500-year lease that the town library owns. So I think if you guys are on board with that, you'd give Brooke and I permission to move forward and work with the town library on solving some of those issues, which will allow them to move forward with their project. And Nancy, I think I presented that correctly? Is she on?
She should be. Yeah.
So that's basically the overview of what their request is.
Okay.
You need a motion for that to move forward, or? Yeah. just
Yeah, any final agreement that we come up with would come back to the board for approval. Anyways, this would just be to move forward with the project.
So I would make the motion to allow Brooke and Chris to move forward with the Castleton Library, putting the adjustments of the property lines. Does that sound good?
I'll second it, Peter Stone.
Just one quick question. Are we gonna move that line far enough west so that they now possess the parking spaces and we just have that right away to the back of the building?
I think that's one option, and also our oil tank is in the back there, so we gotta make sure that that goes onto our property if it's not already.
Okay.
Kind of straighten up that boundary between the two buildings.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very married.
Yep.
Are there any questions from the board about the dealings with the library and the property line adjustments?
Costs.
Is that Tara that made the motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mike has a question.
There's bound to be, I would imagine, survey costs, attorney costs, recording fees. Who would be responsible for those?
The town library's already done a lot of the survey work,
Mm-hmm.
and because I believe it's beneficial to the school district to get these disputes, property lines adjusted properly, I think the board should pay for at least our attorney fees. This isn't.
All right, and just last call for Joe or Nancy Mark, if you're there online and want to just speak to anything, now's your time.
Can't hear you, Nancy, for some reason.
Star 6 to unmute.
Oh, she's unmuted. She looks unmuted. I don't know what's going on.
You want another minute?
Put it in the chat, or she can send me an email.
Yeah, she can send me.
I'll on speaker.
I just have her email.
Hey, Josh Hart, you're in charge of the campfire, okay?
All right, I got it.
All right.
What do you mean? I was gonna circle the cars like a party with our lights on.
Get you, get some dry kindling and, do a,
Bugs are really starting to snap. Why'd you leave? But I know now, it's a bug thing.
Lights. That's why I was like, get me out of there.
Oh, they are, they keep, I'm about to.
all right, so I think they're getting what they want, right? Where the board is cooperating, and we will communicate with them and make this happen for them. So, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay, remote board members, you're good? All yays? We lost them too, huh?
Yes.
Oh, I was gonna say maybe.
Yay.
All right.
It's getting later, they're getting.
All right, and then it appears to be the last item on the agenda is the retirement incentive plan, part 2. Brooke, go ahead.
Correct. So, I sent the board, a retirement, incentive plan, last week, I think on Friday. Certainly, we are trying to be considerate, of our staff, which may fall into a vulnerable, category, in terms of, being at high risk for complications from COVID. Certainly looking at this as a possible offering for staff if it works for them and they're willing to consider that. We have had some staff ask for exemptions to teach remotely. Right now, if we're doing an in-person delivery of instruction, we don't have the ability to honor those requests in our current situation. So certainly concerned about the cost of long-term substitutes if that were to happen, if teachers couldn't return to in-person learning. So this is a way we're thinking about addressing some of those issues to the best of our ability. We already offer a retirement incentive in the contract. It is 50% of a teacher's salary if after you've been here for 20 years, paid out over 3 years. This is a more enticing incentive, but certainly it would cost less than having to employ a long-term substitute for a year and pay a salary. So, you know, bringing it here, I've spoken with the union about it. You know, I'm not certain anybody would take it. It's just another avenue to explore to try to address some of the issues that we're grappling with.
And we have to choose between option 1 and option 2?
No, no, it would just be
they
the
would
entirety.
choose between option 1 and option 2.
Correct.
Okay.
And I just, you know, don't know what your feelings are on it, but if we were to offer something, we would have to offer it soon.
Right.
To know if we had openings within the district or not.
What was that Julie said?
I thought we might have to choose between the options that were listed as a board, but no, they choose. We okay the options, and they choose between the options.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We need a motion for that?
Yeah.
Make a motion to accept the early retirement plans.
Second.
Peter Stone made the motion.
And Julie.
I got a question.
Sorry, we can't hear you guys at all.
So Peter made a motion to accept the early retirement incentive as presented, and Julie seconded it. And now there's discussion.
And I'll start with Mr. Wilson.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. The options was 70 and 60?
Yes. Correct.
So what's the difference between the two?
60% is paid out over 2 years, so.
Oh.
Right, it's a shorter time period, so it costs us more.
Okay.
In that year, yeah.
The other one's 3 years.
Correct, 70 is over 3 years.
John, go ahead.
So in introducing this, you said there's already something in place if you've been here 20 years and it's 50%?
But the deadline is, I should have clarified, the deadline is December 1st of the previous year to apply. So the
I'm sorry, we can't hear what anybody else is saying.
So John asked, he asked me to clarify that there is indeed something already in place. But what I'm clarifying is that the deadline to take part in that retirement incentive is December 1st of the previous year. So if you wanted to retire as of June 30th, 2020, you needed to let the district know December 1st of 2019. So we're well past the deadline for that, and that's part of the master agreement.
Well, so then instead of offering them more money to extend till now their option to retire, why don't we just waive the requirement to request this, waive the January deadline and leave it at the 50% we're already offering?
You could, however, I would suspect if teachers could have retired last year, they would have done so. And in some cases, we have teachers that would need to buy an extra year, possibly on their retirement, which would cost them more money. So I'm not sure we would gain anything by doing that.
So the difference between the one that was December is you had to be a different age, correct?
It was still 50, but you had to have 20 years of experience.
And this one's 15, right?
Right, and it's a different percentage.
Right, okay. All right.
What's the cost savings or the forecast for how many people we'd be looking at for long-term substitutes? Any kind of spitball on that?
Well, I mean, I would defer to Cheryl, but typically when we have a teacher, at the upper end of their career, their salaries, high 60s, 70s, $1,000, and typically when we bring in a long-term sub or a new hire, we're typically talking somebody in the range of low 40s for salary. So it potentially could be a significant savings. The other thing is, like we've been doing all along, any position that it becomes vacant due to attrition, we would definitely consider, you know, whether or not we fill that position, depending on what that position is, so.
But this is on a first come, first served basis.
Correct. They would have 2 weeks and we would take the first 5 people. And certainly if we had a bunch and you wanted to extend that, that would be your prerogative, but.
What was that question that you just answered?
So what would be the potential cost savings?
Okay. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns about the incentive plan? Okay, hearing nothing here, nothing online. All those in favor of approving, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And any opposed?
No.
Nay.
Let's just do a roll call on the nays. I see Bonnie Lenahan, I see Glenn.
No.
John.
Okay, John is a nay. Becky Spears is a nay. And Michael Batch is a nay. Am I missing anyone online who's a nay?
Patty Bond.
Patty Beaumont is a nay. So that motion passes. Okay, we're getting there, almost done, I think, right? Other business.
I think we need feedback on the flyer.
Okay,
I have good news to report.
okay. Well, let's go with good news first. You win, Chris.
Please.
United, we are a recipient, Slate Valley Snack Sack Program is a recipient again this year of a grant. We are receiving a $20,000 grant from the United Way to continue our Snack Sack program for the 2021 school year.
Excellent.
So if you didn't hear that online, we are recipients of a $20,000 grant for the Snack Sack program from United Way again this year. So some good news.
Okay. Glenn, you had other business?
Yeah, I was just wondering, has there been anything that's come down from Montpelier in regards to fall sports?
So we were expecting to receive that by last Friday. We did not receive it. I would expect that we get the fall sports guidance this week. Really, the start date's been pushed back to the beginning of school. We can't start any
We had
fall.
practice going on out here tonight of some sort.
I know,
football,
pole vaulting.
And there was no social distancing or anything.
Well, we don't.
It's not school
It's
sanctioned.
not school sponsored. We're not offering any school sponsored sports. I would expect, just what I'm hearing, that there could be significant restrictions on what's allowed for fall sports, but I don't have that in front of me.
More to
So.
come.
And Glenn, to that point, sports are important to a lot of people.
Oh, I know.
We're kind of at the mercy here of the VPA, but if you want to advocate for sports, our principals are members of the VPA. You can email the VPA directly. I've seen multiple petitions going around online for whatever those are worth. I know it's an important thing for a lot of people. We might not like the outcome or the decision, but we can certainly try to let our opinions known.
Excuse me, following up on that, but our playgrounds are still closed?
Correct, until we have to find.
Well, there's no cleaning procedure in place for the pole vault mat, is there?
But they use their own pole vaulting pole. Not school.
What do they land on?
They just landed on the mat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Yep.
You're right.
Well, we'll have to address that. So John brought up the fact that, you know, our playgrounds are still closed, but what you can't see because you're virtual is, we had some students here or folks here practicing pole vaulting. So John just brought up the concern that, they're landing on a school-issued mat that we have not sanitized, so we'll have to look into that. But playgrounds right now are still closed until we can figure out a way to sanitize them between use.
And there's a difference between playgrounds and school playgrounds. I think if you look at the governor's guidance on the ACCD website, it basically says playgrounds can be open as long as there's a informational posting about, you know, symptoms, etc. But if you then look under the guidance specific for schools and playgrounds on schools' property, they do speak more directly to the idea of having to routinely sanitize. So there is a difference. So, you know.
Is Fairhaven Grade Schools open? Because that's owned by the town.
The Fairhaven Grade Schools is owned by the town,
Yeah,
so we
so
don't
that-
have, so it's very confusing. We have multiple agencies making different decisions, and we're really trying to abide by all of the rules, so.
Okay, and then Brooke had also wanted to talk about, just get some feedback on the layout of this flyer, right?
So I just wanted to follow up, we did put together a new annual report that we'll put on the website, but I think I shared with you in an email, the cost to mail that is between $13,000 and $20,000 to residents. So we didn't think that was, you know, prudent. Also, it would take 3 weeks. So certainly we didn't have that kind of time. So we'll make it available. We'll put it on the website. We'll print, you know, 100 copies here, you know, in our office in black and white and put it around the towns. But, you know, it's not something we're going to be able to mail to every resident. So instead, we've worked with the printing company. We've come up with this flyer. Instead, certainly the entire budget will be available online, all 40 pages of it, if somebody would like. We're also happy, you know, if somebody calls and they want us to mail them a copy individually, happy to work with folks to get that done. But I didn't know if there was any feedback on this at all. I mean, it needs to go to the printer first thing tomorrow morning if we're going to get it out.
So do we need income sensitivity on there? Anybody else feel, I hear no comments about that, no questions about that, no concerns about that.
Julie and Betsy heard concerns about that, so I think that is important.
Concerns about what percentage of Benson pay on income?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't understand what you were talking about.
So in the
hear very
flyer,
well.
that's all right, in the flyer, there's a section it's called income sensitivity, where some pay tax, and I have not heard a word about that from any of the reports from any towns. Nobody has brought up income sensitivity, so I wondered why it needed to be in the flyer.
Because it was brought up, I guess we just didn't mention it, but we did talk about it for quite a while in Benson.
Doesn't hurt anything.
Well, I'd like to say, I think the meat and potatoes that we're missing that looks like it's small print and gonna get missed is on page 2, the front, that center box that's in bold right now. I mean, you can read it easily, but it says that this is our proposed budget that is only looking at expenditures. I think that needs to be a bigger part of this flyer so that folks understand that piece first and foremost.
It also says that it'll be on the fold, if you look at the section,
This will get folded in half like this
so
for
under,
mailing.
there's a statement on that, will be like
Let me see that, Brooke.
fold.
Well,
If you have an email with it in there,
Yes.
it's an attached to an email.
I think the rest
Can
of
you,
it that goes
so
into
it will be
what
folded.
happens if it doesn't pass, that part has got to come up with that.
It's also
Thank
in
you,
the
Brooke.
FAQ, it was
I don't
hard.
think folks are looking at that though.
Okay. I just have to figure out where to fit it.
I understand what it looks like, and this is very similar to the last one we sent out, and the one thing that I can say is that there was so much passion showed against passing this the last time. I think if we repeat it and it looks too similar to that, that if we don't brand it a little bit differently, we're going to have the same outcome.
What about having people sit at the major stores like Buxton's and the G&L and maybe Shaw's? I don't know what the major stores are in Castleton or Hubbardton. But what if a board member from each town sits and with a mask and passes out and tries to educate some of the public? I mean, that was something that was brought up at our meeting.
Are we allowed to do that now with the restrictions?
I don't see why not if we don't ask, as long as we're wearing a mask.
No, I thought there was some, it might have been a while ago, but I thought there were some restrictions on setting up a table outside. I mean, I didn't think
I don't think it allows anymore.
Oh, I don't think we,
I mean-
they're saying,
I don't think you can.
they're
You
saying
can't
we
set
don't.
up, right, you can't stand outside a store or set up a table outside of anything right now.
I mean, the Gino has a bench that you can sit on, so why can't one person from each town pass out flyers and try to educate some of the public? I mean, that's our biggest complaint at each of our meetings from every town, is that we're not getting the message out there.
You're gonna have to ask them if they're a registered voter or not.
Obviously, our imprint, our online, our social media isn't working, so we need to do something different to get this budget passed. And we need to go to extreme measures. I mean, I'm willing to sit and pass out flyers. I'm willing to talk to Greg and Lisa at the G&L and ask them, where can I stand to do this? Because we really need this budget to pass.
That's gonna be a hard task, because you're gonna have to know who a resident is of the town you're in, and you're gonna have to find out if they're a registered voter. I mean, I guess staying outside of Buxton's, but I have a lot of out-of-staters coming here.
Are you a registered voter of the Slate Valley Union? If you are, can you please take this flyer? Our budget is very important.
Yeah, there's nothing preventing a board member from doing anything like that. So, I mean, Rebecca's right. We gotta just, offer ourselves in whatever capacity we can as individuals to get the word out. I think that goes without saying.
So if we all agree, each town, to take turns to sit in front of the most populous store, or a couple of stores, or the post office, if we really want this to pass, we all have to work together on this.
I agree. Just email in your ideas and where you think you'll be on what date.
If we all agree to do this day before.
Well, that's kind of difficult when you have to work all day the day before the vote.
I know.
Or on a weekend right before the vote. I'm sorry, just any day before the vote,
And
close to the vote.
You're asking people to be comfortable talking to the public in less than 6 feet. And I'm just saying, I think that's a lot to ask. I think it's an individual thing, and if people want to do it, they can put out there that that's what they're doing. But I don't think it can be asked of us.
Well, I feel if we're willing to ask all of the board members to be at a in-person meeting, and we're willing to ask our kids to go to school, that we should be willing to ask our board members to put themselves out there with masks to ask people to vote for our budget.
People want to, they can.
Yeah, I think it's gonna.
Yeah.
Okay, Rebecca, I can just say that everyone here is nodding their heads. We understand your point. I don't think we're going to set rules right now for the board members to follow. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, but that doesn't appear to carry any.
I'm just asking maybe for people in each town to talk together, to come together in each town to sign up together to do this. If we want this to pass, we need to make our presence more known in the community. How many of us have heard at these various in-person meetings that they don't trust us, they don't think that we can come together and work together? This is a way to show our presence in the community and to get the community to trust us.
We're just reiterating at this point.
All right, thank you, Rebecca.
So go back to feedback. I didn't understand what Becky was asking to be moved around on the flyer.
On page 2, the front, if we can bring up the statement that is in that bold print in the center and put that more prominently instead of slipping it between the two pieces where it's at currently. I think that's a
What's
critical
this statement? Because my page 2 might look different than yours.
It's right here, these two paragraphs.
Oh, that's my page 4.
Okay. Well, never mind.
That's all right. So the one that says the proposed budget includes only the expenditures necessary to address that one.
Yep.
And the one below it? Or just that one?
I think that's the most critical piece, is talking about that. I mean, we've got part of it put onto the front, but I think you need to put the rest of it that says, if we don't, we're borrowing and we only can go up to 87% of the last.
I think that's a great point.
I do too. I like that.
That's a great point.
I think that part's the selling feature that we need to really kind of fix in it.
So, and methods of voting. I mean, should we be bolding and underlining, we encourage you to consider voting by absentee ballot? Or should we just be kind of, I mean, we shouldn't really be telling people how to vote. Isn't that a personal choice? I don't know.
Just put, you may consider voting by absentee ballot.
I mean, I think most people know the methods of voting. I don't know if we need to even, please vote.
Well, especially with the motion that we made previous to authorize the clerks to automatically send those out if they've already requested an absentee ballot.
Should that be on there then?
We heard some feedback that they would like it on there, because a lot of folks felt they were not aware, because of whatever time frames were available, that they could vote by absentee.
And we were asked, and
And you still
because of
may if you
COVID,
have
to
already
encourage absentee ballots.
That's fine. I think
So
that's fine.
maybe this should be on the back and the other one should be on the front? Or, I mean, what would we take off of this front to fit in that other statement?
Make the Slate Valley smaller and put it underneath the school budget revote?
So make the school budget revote Tuesday, August 11th, and the Slate Valley all a little smaller, and stick that
Yeah.
under there?
Yeah, make the emblem
Yep.
a little bit smaller, and then you can move that up and you can put that in there a little bit bigger letters.
Yep.
I think the voting needs to stay on the front, so people know where to vote. But should we put a statement in there saying that town clerks will be? So
One thing that was brought up in Benson a couple of times was that people really think that they're still voting on the bond.
Yeah, that's why we're talking about adding the proposed budget includes only the expenditures.
Well, we can't hear you online.
Yep, I get it.
So there, go ahead.
Is there any way we can just put like a one-sentence statement on this somewhere that for people that want a more detailed, the whole budget picture, please contact the superintendent's office, or you go to the town clerk's office to get one of the full printed report, so that then they've got the option. If they really want the 41-page budget, they can go pick one up in their town.
Well, we can modify the statement. It already says that the detailed budget for the district may be found by going to our website, but we can.
Because that's the one thing that we kept hearing, is that they want a printed one. They don't want to have to find it on the website.
And to Julie's point, I mean, there should be a link right there on the front page of
There
the
already
SV.
is.
Okay, there is.
There
Like,
already is.
click
It's
here.
all on the front page.
Here's your 40-page
Give you
document.
directions on exactly how to find it.
Okay.
Already on the front page.
Oh, directions on how to find it, or a link that brings you right to it?
I can't look right now.
Okay. because those are two different things. I don't think people are gonna take steps. I think they wanna click on the link on the front page and just have it appear.
There's an entire website banner that shows the link to it. It's not the actual link. It's the steps that you proceed to follow to get to it.
So why can't we make the link clickable?
Because do you want them to just see the budget or all of the information that's available to them?
I think I want them to just see the budget if we're sending this.
You don't want them to see the frequently asked questions document or anything else?
I think they get frustrated looking at this point. I think we've sent that already once, so I agree, I think those are all great pieces. But based on feedback, I think the folks are frustrated and just want it easy peasy, like nothing's hidden on this one.
Yep.
And they'll trust us a bit more.
Yep.
Be more than 2 clicks and they're gone.
I agree. Nobody wants steps. I mean, you could have the link to the budget and link to frequently asked questions. Budget, frequently asked questions. Click, click. Bring you right to whatever you want to go to.
We can jam a link up there tonight. That's easy.
Again, most of the people in Benson said that they didn't get the online stuff. It's the in-person stuff that means the most to them. Am I right, Kathy?
Yeah, but Becca, I have to say, in Castleton, it was 70-30. 70% wanted it on a website and 30% of it wanted it mailed. We have to hit all of it.
So in-person gets more of it. I mean, we have to take that into consideration. Both of our meetings said in-person means more. That a lot of the times people throw away mailings. They ignore the emails. They don't look at the social media.
So that's not what I was saying, Becca. I was saying that 30% wanted it mailed. They want a piece of paper in their hand, and 70% wanted it on the web. We had nobody in ours that wanted in-person
70% of the people who showed up wanted it in person.
But I think we're looking
70% of what number?
I have talked to want something in person. They don't necessarily
Right.
the meeting, so they want something in person from us.
What do you mean by
You two are talking back and forth, and yes, you're both right? Castleton said one thing and Benson said another.
Right.
So, the way that you rectify that problem is you just do both of them. I don't understand what the problem would be to have what I would call a live link for those two documents that you're talking about. What's the downfall?
No, that's right. Everything.
So that way if they click it, they click it. If they don't, they don't. It's no big deal. The only suggestion I would also make is, and I can't remember now what it says on the first page, but it says something like, this is only the operating budget. I would go one step further and put in not the bond, like in big bold letters. And I know that sounds silly, but I do believe that there were too many people who continuously think we're trying to vote on a bond. Still vote on a bond.
I agree with you, Patty, 100%.
Okay, this isn't a motion, so we're not approving anything. I'm sure Brooke and Josh will work on an alternate version, and if you have other points that you want to make, email those up.
I really would need those before 8 o'clock tomorrow morning because this has to get.
When does this have to go out?
Tomorrow at like 8 o'clock. It's got to get to the printer tomorrow.
Email your concerns tonight and expect another draft tomorrow morning. And
So Brooke, if we are willing to sit in front of a store, how do we get multiple copies?
Just ask Chelsea or I and we'll get them to you.
Thank you.
I've got one quick question.
Sure.
So we authorize the town clerks to send people that they've already sent absentee ballots to it. So does that mean they're gonna do it, or do we have to tell the town clerks to do it?
We have to tell the town clerks to do it, which I will tomorrow.
Okay. So the other question is, should that say it in here so the people that already got it know they're gonna get it? Because
yes.
Town clerk at Orwell said that 200 people have already filed for absentee
Right.
ballots.
No, we can change that.
Just so that the people that already have them realize they're gonna be getting them.
Coming your way, yep.
That's 25% of the registered vote.
Yep, I can do that, not a problem.
All right, is there any other business? Brooke, is there a need for exec? Go
What
ahead.
about inviting select board members to our meetings, like actually sending them an email to maybe get more information out to the towns, which was suggested by Norma Phillips.
So Castleton's select board meetings are on the same night as our school board meetings.
Orwell's are as well.
Orwell's are as well.
So is there any way to copy them with the minutes to help them understand further what's going on so they can spread the word in their meetings?
We'd have to talk to the select board to see if they even wanna do that.
Then why don't we, since this needs to be more of a community thing?
I'd be willing, from a Castleton point of view, to email the select board members to bring awareness to them.
The Benson Select Board member has been here all evening listening.
Okay, well, good.
And bring that to the meetings.
You can just do it with the town manager in Castleton, that's the easiest.
All right, Brooke, is there a need for an executive session?
No.
So the next meeting is August 10th. We have an informational meeting before then, so in terms of agenda building, I think we'll be in touch, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious what we're...
Yeah, it's gonna be focused on the reopening of school.
And the August 10th meeting is like this?
Yes.
I know, I'm going to. I'm not gonna sit here.
All right, so we'll wrap this up. I really appreciate everyone showing up.
Thank
You know, I know how we all feel. I know how I feel personally, but I think we all need to work on trying to understand how other people feel who might not share exactly our points of view. I think we all just need to listen and be respectful and tolerant of everyone. And we're all on the same team. And again, I'm very optimistic. I'm really proud of our administrators and our teachers and principals. And this year is going to be a success. I'm determined and I'm very confident. So again, thank you all for coming tonight. I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Julie.
Peter.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.